Hello everyone. This is What If Rayleigh Trained Luffy's Gear 5. Please like and subscribe. 2 likes for next part. If you have any fanfic or what if ideas, please comment them down below. How long are you gonna lay there like a moron? Our story begins with a memory of two brothers staring out into the ocean from a cliff. The boy who spoke first was portrayed as Ace, the eldest. Ace is a 10-year-old boy with curly black hair and freckles on his face. He wore a green sleeveless t-shirt with the 2 kanji phrases for innocence and violence on the front and a black elbow guard on his left arm. Below that were his black knee-length shorts and dark brown slippers on his feet. His face was riddled with bandages on his nose, left cheek and forehead, courtesy of injuries he sustained during a recent fight for his life, as well as his brothers. Speaking of which, let's move on to the youngest, Monkey D. Luffy. Luffy is a 7-year-old boy with shaggy black hair. His special feature was the crescent-shaped scar with 3 stitches under his left eye. He wore a purple sleeveless shirt, blue cargo shorts with white cuffs, and a pair of sandals. But what sticks out more was Luffy's treasured straw hat with a red band, which he was clutching tightly over his head while he lies on the grass, sulking. "By the way, the treasure we were keeping in the forest is gone," Ace said, crossing his arms. Luffy didn't respond. His only reaction was silent sobs. Recently, Ace, Luffy, and their late brother, Sabo, were working together to prepare for the day that they would go out to sea and live the life of free men pirates. To do so, the trio honed their survival skills by hunting large wild beasts, fighting street thugs, stealing from nobles, and saving up money to fund their voyage. However, they barked up the wrong tree when they decided to steal money from a crew of vicious pirates. The Blue Gem Pirates. Fearing that their treasure stash may have been compromised, Ace and Sabo relocated every last doubloon with haste. Unfortunately, Luffy was stupid enough to get captured by the pirates, who later began torturing Luffy for information. But he never spoke. Ace and Sabo considered the possibility and stormed in to rescue their little brother. After the incident, the boys managed to escape with their lives, but Luffy was nearly traumatized from the painful experience he just had. But he was able to keep a brave face. Unfortunately, that incident was just the prologue to another tragedy. To the north of their forest playground was the Grey Terminal, a scrapyard full of criminals and dirty dealings to go with them. Beyond that was a city with a high, solid stone wall, handily keeping the nearby criminals at arm's length. Beyond the wall lies many residential building which houses those with noble blood. This was the shining jewel of the Goa Kingdom, the capital of Dawn Island. Said to be the most beautiful place in the East Blue. Not a hint of trash could be found on its streets. During an excursion to the Goa Kingdom, the 3 brothers attempted to trade in some crocodile skin while posing as an adult by stacking on top of each other while wearing a full-body cloak. Unbeknownst to Ace and Luffy, they discovered that Sabo is a runaway noble. Sabo explained to his brothers that he ran away to avoid an arranged marriage to a royal family. His parents cared more about status than their son. Ace and Luffy took it surprisingly well, saying it doesn't matter where Sabo came from. They each shared the same dream. Things got worse, though, when Sabo was then captured by the Blue Gem Pirates, who were hired by his father to bring him back home. When they did, he was introduced to his newly adopted noble brother, Stelly. Sabo was shocked that his parents already considered replacing him. He was later informed provocatively by Stelly that Grey Terminal was due to be set ablaze the following day. The aristocracy planned to burn away the trash outside the city, along with its inhabitants, to make a good impression for the upcoming visit of the Celestial Dragons, the descendants of the founders of the world government. The group of important people, including a world noble, were sent to inspect the East Blue for a suitable candidate to join their ranks. Sabo could no longer stand living in such a dark country that felt like a prison. On the night of the fire, Sabo escapes from his home to try and warn the denizens of Grey Terminal of the impending disaster, but arrived too late. The Blue Gem Pirates, once again hired by the nobles, were charged with the task of starting the fire, only to find out later that they were conned. They were promised a noble status and titles as a reward for their deeds, only to find themselves trapped in the fire, with the entrance to the city locked tight. Failing to prevent the many needless death in Grey Terminal, Sabo, in despair, was then approached by a hooded man in the deserted streets, who asks what's wrong. That man was Monkey D. Dragon, leader of the Revolutionary Army, as well as Luffy's father. Sabo confides the truth of the fire to Dragon and that the nobles and king are responsible. He goes on to say that the kingdom smells worse than the Grey Terminal, as well as its people, and as long as he stays in the kingdom, he will never be free. Dragon was greatly shocked at what Sabo said and that the Goa Kingdom, the place of his birth, has now forced their children to say such things. Meanwhile, at Grey Terminal, the remaining squatters that haven't burned down were getting closer to a fiery death until an unnatural gust of wind created a safe path through the fire, leading to a ship at the coast. The ship belonged to the Revolutionary Army, with some of its members on board, including Dragon. The leader then welcomes those who desire to fight for their freedom onto his ship before sailing away. Ace and Luffy soon found themselves thrown into the mix. In their attempt to bring back Sabo, they also got trapped in the fire. But in the mass hysteria and confusion, the trapped Blue Jam pirates. Outmatched, the boys were nearly killed until they were saved by their adopted family, Curly Dayton and the Mountain Bandits. During the struggle, Dayton and Ace stay behind to fight Blue Jam and his crew, while the rest of the Mountain Bandits and Luffy make a quick escape. The following day, Ace and Dayton return to the bandits' hideout to the relief of Luffy and the other bandits. One of the bandits, Dogra, later returns from town to inform them of some tragic news. In the meantime, Sabo was later recaptured by the police and brought back to his prison home. Fully accepting that he will never find freedom here, he leaves the island the day the Celestial Dragon is set to arrive. Sabo commandeers a small ship, flying a Jolly Roger, and attempts to set sail. But his ship was quickly destroyed by a world noble, supposedly killing Sabo along with it. Later, Ace discovers a letter left behind by Sabo. The letter tells Ace to take care of Luffy. This brings us to the current moment. Luffy went to the Cape by himself to mourn Sabo's death. Ace soon discovers him and continues his speech. Someone must have gotten to it. Survivors from Blue Jam's crew must have taken it, or maybe the military. Either way, there's nothing we can do at this point. Meh, I don't care about the treasure. Not anymore. I mean, those were pirate savings I was sharing with Sabo. And you too, later on, I guess. But in the end, he didn't need money to set sail. So why should I get bent out of shape about it? After all, what's the point in having treasure if you can't even protect it? Luffy finally responds with a sniffle, "Hey Ace." Ace looks down at him. "I want to get stronger and 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 stronger. I want to be the strongest in the world. And then I'll protect everyone. I won't lose anyone I care about." Ace turns his gaze back to the ocean. "You gotta make me a promise," Luffy continued. "I'm begging you, please don't die, Ace." "Cut it out." Ace exclaimed and bonked Luffy on his head, although the latter barely felt it. "You ought to be worried about dying before I do. What did you forget? You're a lot weaker than me. Listen, and you listen up good. I'm never going to die." Luffy sits back up, still clinging to his straw hat, and nods his weeping head. His tears and snot ran down his face. "You know, Sabo told me to take care of you. So I promise, I'm not gonna die, okay? Never. At least, not as long as I've got a wussy little brother who needs me to protect him." "Why yeah. Okay." Luffy whimpered. "Smarts aren't exactly my strong point. So I still don't really understand why Sabo was killed. But whoever did it, they must be opposed to freedom. Because they shot him down before he even got a taste of it. But we shared that same cup of sake with him and we're still alive." Luffy was beginning to calm down, thanks to his big brother's comforting words. Before they lost Sabo, the trio stole a bottle of sake from Dayton and shared it between them. Ace believed that all it takes to become brothers is to share some sake. Whether they were together or apart, on different crews or different ships, they each shared the same dream of living freely. And most of all, they would always be brothers. "Luffy, listen to me, okay?" Ace continued, "There's only one way to live without any regrets." Luffy, still sniffling, nodded, "Hmm. Someday, we're gonna set sail, just like Sabo. We're gonna live the way we wanna live. More free than anyone else." 10 years later. Marine HQ, Marineford, Grand Line. Sounds of gunfire, cannon fire, swords clinging against sword, and cries of battle erupted throughout the frozen battlefield of Marineford. Many men, both marine and pirate alike, were dropping like flies on both sides without either side giving an inch. This historical battle was known as the War of the Best. Ace, also referred to as Fire Fist Ace, and 2nd Division commander of the Whitebeard Pirates, was captured by the same pirate he pursued to punish for betraying his crew by committing the most unforgivable sin a pirate could, killing one of his fellow crew members, claiming the spoils, and then jumped ship. That traitor was known as Marshal D. Teach, aka Blackbeard. A power-hungry pirate who got his hands on the world's most powerful known Loja-type devil fruit, the Dark Fruit. He concocted an elaborate plan to gain even more power by capturing Ace, who was once his superior among the Whitebeard pirates before his betrayal, and handing him over to the Navy and gaining a position as one of the 7 warlords of the seas. But that title, he also gained the privilege of accessing Impel Down, the world's most secure underwater prison. He snuck in with the intent of going down to the lowest level of the prison and recruiting the most heinous and irredeemable villains in the world. The perfect addition to his pirate crew. Straw Hat Luffy learned of Ace's situation and set out to go rescue his brother from execution. But he wasn't alone. Edward Newgate, aka Whitebeard, captain of the Whitebeard Pirates, the strongest man in the world, one of the four emperors, and adopted father of Ace, retaliated to the threat of Ace's death by answering the call to war. He gathered all his forces and allies to lead a full-scale assault on the stronghold of the Marines. Both sides brought their best to the table in a power struggle of such a high magnitude that the outcome would decide the beginning and the end of an era. Luffy joined the fight, creating chaos wherever he went, all to save his brother's life. He teamed up with Whitebeard, as well as some new allies and past enemies he made. At first, Luffy failed to break Ace out of Impel Down before they transferred him to Marineford for his public execution. But with his miraculous good luck, he prevailed through every obstacle that got in his way, eventually leading him to a warzone. But the chaos was far from over. Luffy had to fight through his own grandfather, Vice Admiral Monkey D. Garp, aka Garp the Fist, and hero of the Marines. Garp had more than enough strength to stop his rebellious grandson, but didn't have the heart to kill his own kin. Ace, we're getting you out of here. Luffy, no. But his luck wasn't enough to save Ace. After succeeding to free Ace from his restraints, the two brothers rushed to flee from the battle with what's left of his crew, only to fall for a taunt by Marine Admiral Sakazuki, aka Akainu. The ruthless user of the magma fruit called Whitebeard a coward for running from a fight. Ace's pride couldn't allow that remark to go uncorrected. Turning around, despite Luffy's pleas, Ace charged at the Admiral in rage, attacking with a fist of fire granted to him by eating the flame fruit. Despite his best efforts, fire was no match for magma. Luffy wanted to stop Ace from throwing his life away after he just saved him, but was too weak and exhausted from fighting for so long. In an attempt to strike at Luffy while he was vulnerable, Akainu's molten fist was blocked by Ace, who now had a burning hole right through his torso. On the ground was a small piece of paper, a Vivre card. 1 minute it was whole, the next, it was quickly burning away. A Vivre card is a special paper that represents the life force of its owner. This one belonged to Ace. He gave it to Luffy some time ago, telling him that that paper would reunite them one day. But now it's the countdown to Ace's inevitable demise. Luffy couldn't believe what he witnessed. He couldn't look at anything but Ace, who stood there, gritting his teeth after he coughs up blood, as if knowing that his life is about to end. Luffy stared with eyes wide and full of disbelief. Ace. Akainu pulled back his fist, still burning, but Ace refused to cry out in pain. Ace fell forward, landing in Luffy's arms. The younger brother lifted his hand from the hole in Ace's back to find it covered in blood. Sorry, Luffy, Ace whispered in his now broken voice, I tried. Don't worry. We'll get you some help. Luffy said fearfully. Ace, despite the state he was in, couldn't help but smile, thank you for trying so hard, but this is as far as I can go. Come on, what are you saying? This isn't over yet. Luffy's words were only getting harder to say. Before Akainu could finish what he started, two division commanders of the Whitebeard Pirates, Marco the Phoenix and Flower Sword Vista, joined the scene to stop the Mad Admiral. They both succeeded in pushing him back. GRR. Marco growled, we were so close. Don't give up yet. We still have a chance. Vista shouted. Akainu, now with a large magma leaking welt across his neck, hissed in pain, you're too late. Marco and Vista pressed on with their attacks. This way, Doctor, quick. Exclaimed one of the nearby Whitebeard pirates, it's not looking good. A man with a black coat, top hat and doctor's bag approached Ace from behind to examine the wound, but he feared the worst. I can feel my life, Ace struggled to say, slipping away, so, listen to me, Luffy. Ace. There is one thing that hurts, Ace confessed softly, I won't be around to see you fulfill your dream. Tears were now weeping out of Luffy's eyes. I know you can do it because you're my little brother, Ace said, gently panting for air, do you remember that day? I did it, I lived with no regrets, even though it ended this way, can't complain now. Well, I can. Luffy wailed, you can't die like this. Sure, things could have gone better, but it's alright. Luffy's tears now lead to sobs. I can't raise my voice anymore, I'm too weak. Tell everyone else what I'm about to say, alright. Not wanting to miss a single word, Luffy drowned out the noise of the surrounding battlefield to hear Ace's final words. But, he still couldn't accept the fact that Ace was dying. He lost one brother before, to which he declared that he would get stronger no matter what it takes, so he wouldn't have to go through that pain again. Ops, my family and you, Luffy, thank you for caring about someone like me who has bad blood in his veins. Ace whispered as the last tears he'll ever shed now pours down his cheeks, mixed in with his blood. Despite everything that's happened, Ace sounded so happy. Thank you for loving me, thank you so much. But those final words, Ace smiled as his eyes slowly shut for good. His whole body slackens as if trying to stay in Luffy's arms for just a moment longer, but all the strength he had left had all but slipped away, and he fell. Ace was dead. The Vivre card burned to nothing. Never before had Luffy been filled with so much feeling and pain as he does now. Stunned, Luffy's arms fell to his side. Looking down desperately, he spotted the gaping hole that destroyed the mark of the Whitebeard pirates on Ace's back. A mark that was his pride. A mark he used to shield his kid brother from the fate that claimed him instead. Ace's face held no pain, though. In the end, it was full of peace, complete with a smile. But what troubled Ace deep down before he died was that he was unable to fulfill his promise to Sabo. Ace. His brother's blood was still dripping off his hands, his chest getting tighter and tighter. Ace's dying words echoed in his ears. He could barely hear the cries and screams of Ace's comrades as they mourn their fallen friend. Unable to hold in all the built-up despair, Luffy's whimpers turned to cries and screams that grew louder and louder. And with one last shriek of pain and shock, he raised his head to the sky. Aye. Then darkness fell. Present. The Skena, calm belt. Luffy gasped, eyes widened as he sat upright wearing nothing but his blue shorts and sandals, as well as some bandages wrapped around his abdomen and right upper arm. What was new was the X-shaped scar on his chest, courtesy of Akainu after he blacked out, from what he'd been told. His trademark straw hat, though, was missing. He was dripping with sweat from head to toe and panting desperately for air and staring around wildly, as if predators were hiding in the darkness of the night. "Did you have a nightmare?" asked a concerned voice. Luffy looks up to see his mentor, Rayleigh. The old man approached him, holding a drink of some kind, as if he expected something like this. Our King Silvers Rayleigh is an elderly man in his 70s with a well-built body. His white facial hair was arranged embattled across his lower jaw. He has a long and old vertical scar over his right eye, which was behind his round glasses. He was dressed in a plain t-shirt, shorts, sandals, and a large silver hooded cloak draped over it all with the hood down. He met Luffy when he and his crew arrived at Sabati Archipelago, located at the very end of Paradise, the first half of the Grand Line. He's a retired pirate who once served as the first mate and right hand of the late Gold D. Roger, the king of the pirates. Because of this, Rayleigh, despite his old age, was an extremely powerful individual. After his old crew disbanded 22 years ago, he became a coating mechanic working at Sabati Archipelago. He quickly became friends with Luffy and his crew, the Straw Hat Pirates, after they discovered him at a slave trading auction house, posing as a slave. He was planning on robbing whoever bought him before escaping as a free man again. After learning of Luffy's whereabouts after the war, Rayleigh swam to the island of Amazon Lily, an empire ruled by the Kuja, a tribe made up of entirely female warriors, located in the Calm Belt. When he arrived there, Rayleigh offered Luffy two choices on what he wanted to do next: meet up with his crew and go to the New World, the second half of the Grand Line, unprepared, or stay and train for 2 years. "You're covered in sweat," Rayleigh added. Luffy slowly looks up at him fearfully, as if expecting him to be Akainu. Rayleigh holds out the mug to the young man. "Here, try drinking this." Luffy desperately takes it and doesn't think twice before chugging down the contents almost as quickly as a certain friend of his with a good bottle of booze. "There you go," Rayleigh reassured. After losing his big brother, Ace, during the War of the Best at Marineford, Monkey D. Luffy was left in a fragile state, both mentally and physically, for a while. Miraculously, he escaped thanks to the assistance of Trafalgar D. Waterlaw, the Surgeon of Death, captain of the Heart Pirates, and fellow Supernova, in his submarine. For 3 straight days, Luffy was in a medically induced coma after blacking out. Thanks to Law's generous medical services, Luffy's injuries were on the path to healing, but his mind was still shattered. The first thing Luffy noticed when he gained consciousness was that he was back in the jungles of Amazon Lily. Looking down, he saw that his entire body was covered head to toe in bandages, looking almost like a mummy. His thoughts were interrupted by recollecting memories of what went down at Marineford and what he had lost. The visions drove Luffy berserk, which drove him to destroy the trees and boulders around him. Even while completely wrapped in bandages, Luffy was slowing down, nor did he feel the pain of his wounds reopening. After an unforeseen amount of time had passed, Luffy finally calmed down, now breathing heavily. Feeling his strength leaving him, he dropped down to all fours and noticed he was bleeding out of the various spots of his bandages. He was then approached by a large figure. A whale shark fisherman who Luffy met in Impel Down where he was held prisoner. This was Knight of the Sea Jin, a former member of both the Sun Pirates and the 7 Warlords of the Seas. He resigned from the latter during the War of the Best for refusing to participate in the battle. Before the war, Jin was freed from Impel Down by Luffy after he made it to the lowest level of the prison. In return, Jin offered to repay his liberator by assisting him in Ace's rescue. After the war ended, Jin accompanied Luffy and Law's submarine back to Amazon Lily. Convincing Luffy that he wasn't dreaming, Jin could only watch as Luffy cried his eyes out while yelling out Ace's name. Before Luffy could go on another temper tantrum, Jin was able to pin him down and remind him of what he has left in this world. Luffy still has his crew. Remembering that he had to meet them back at Sabati Archipelago, where they first got separated, Luffy and Jin walked back to the coast where the Heart Pirates docked their submarine. It was at that time that Rayleigh appeared from the ocean, saying that he swam through the calm belt which was overcrowded with sea kings. But knowing his strength, nobody was surprised. Out of the two choices Rayleigh gave to Luffy, he decided to be smart for once and choose to hold off on meeting up with his crew to train for 2 years. After getting the message across to the scattered members of the Straw Hat Pirates, the Kuja Pirates, led by Pirate Empress Boa Hancock, one of the 7 warlords of the seas, offered to take them to the nearby island of Liscana, which is a harsh island with 48 seasons per year which changes almost weekly. Not to mention it was inhabited by colossal beasts that were at least more than 10 times their usual size. It was the perfect place to train. 3 months had passed since Rayleigh started training Luffy in the arts of Haki. Haki was the mysterious power that allows the user to utilize their willpower and spiritual energy for various purposes. Rayleigh explained and demonstrated the different forms of Haki to Luffy on the first day of their training. There were 3 separate categories of Haki: Observation Haki, Armament Haki, and Conqueror's Haki. Observation Haki gives the user a sixth sense of the world around them, allowing them to sense the presence, strength, and emotions of other people. It also grants limited precognitive abilities, allowing the user to sense their opponent's intentions and predict their actions and attacks before they happen. Armament Haki allows the user to use their spiritual energy as armor to defend against attacks, as well as make their attacks more potent. It can also be used to bypass the defenses of devil fruit powers that make the user somewhat invincible, such as Loja intangibility. A person can apply Armament Haki to a section of their body, over their entire body, and even imbue it onto their weapons. Conqueror's Haki, the rarest form of Haki, allows the user to exert their willpower over others. This type of Haki cannot be attained through training, and only 1 in several million people are born with this ability. It is said that 1 in a million people who can possess this type of Haki have the qualities of a king, otherwise known as the color of the Supreme King. After witnessing Rayleigh's demonstrations on a giant wild elephant, Luffy recalled moments on his journey when he subconsciously used Conqueror's Haki, but didn't know what it was. He also recalled witnessing certain people use Observation Haki, as well as being on the receiving end of Armament Haki. After Luffy finished his drink, he looked around until his eyes stopped at the large campfire that was cooking up a large chunk of meat that he would happily eat later. "Do you feel okay?" Rayleigh asked. "Not really," Luffy answered hesitantly. Rayleigh cocked an eyebrow. What's wrong?" "It's not enough." "What, you need a refill?" "Not the drink, my training." "Luffy, it's only been a few months and you're already making a lot of progress," Rayleigh reminded him. "You can use Armament Haki most of the time now. Your Observation Haki is getting good but still needs work and you've just started working on that new 4th gear of yours. We still have 21 months of training left. So why do you say it's now enough?" "I know I'm getting stronger, but," Luffy lowered his head, staring into his empty mug, "I just don't think it'll be enough. I want to be even stronger than I thought imaginable. I want to be able to protect my friends and their dreams." Luffy paused. "I trained for years before I set out to sea. By the time I left my home village, I was already the strongest pirate in the East Blue. When I first got to the Grand Line, I started running into fighters who were more challenging than the last. My first big challenge was Crocodile. The former warlords." "Yeah, him. He was the second Loja I ever fought and I lost to him twice before I finally took him down." "Second? Who was the first?" "The first was that smoky guy that I met in Logetown. He's a marine." "You mean Commodore Smoker?" Luffy gave his mentor a questionable look. "Yeah, that's what I said." Rayleigh ignored Luffy's obliviousness. "Anyway, you were saying." "Right. Anyway, after losing to Crocodile more than once, I know that it was only a matter of time before I run into even stronger enemies than him. That's when I found out about 2nd gear. To be honest, I learned it by accident." "Yes, you showed it to me a while ago," Rayleigh reminisced while stroking his beard. "You used your elasticity to accelerate your blood flow, burning through more nutrients and oxygen. It makes you move a lot faster. A process that would kill any normal person." "Yeah," Luffy nodded in agreement, "but Chopper tells me that it was taxing on my body. I love the technique, but if it destroys my body, I'm not gonna get much done. 3rd gear is pretty much the same, and 4th gear is even harder." "Yes, there's the drawback of 3rd gear that shrinks to the size of a toddler for about a minute after you release all that air in your bones. But it's too soon to know what you can do with 4th gear. You still need to master your Haki." "I'm not worried about my Haki, it's just," Luffy paused, "I don't think I'm using my devil fruit powers to the fullest." "You know, come to think of it," Rayleigh pondered, catching Luffy's attention, "you said the name of your fruit was the gum gum fruit, right?" Luffy nodded. Rayleigh went over to his backpack and pulled out 4 books. 3 of them had very similar covers, but the other one looks like it hasn't even been published. Devil Fruit Encyclopedia I, Paramecia, by Dr. Vegapunk. Devil Fruit Encyclopedia 2, Zone, by Dr. Vegapunk. Devil Fruit Encyclopedia 3, Loja, by Dr. Vegapunk. Devil Fruit Encyclopedia X, Classified. What are those? Luffy asked. These are the latest Devil Fruit Encyclopedia books that I acquired in the New World many years ago, back when I sailed with my old crew. They're extremely hard to get, especially the complete set. They were written by the world government's lead scientist, Dr. Vegapunk, the smartest man alive. So? Luffy seemed uninterested. If we can find your fruit in these books, maybe you'll learn something new. Now, let me take a look. Paramecia, right? Rayleigh asked, while already flipping through the pages of the Paramecia book. Skimming through the alphabetized catalog of devil fruits, Rayleigh stopped when he got to G. Why don't you grab a bite off the spit while I do some quick research, Luffy? You look hungry, the old man said, not looking up from his book. Why meat? After several minutes of eating his fill, Luffy patted his now fat belly like a bongo. He let out a satisfied sigh after licking his fingers clean. Find anything yet, Rayleigh? Luffy asked, turning towards his mentor. Yes and no, Rayleigh answered ominously. Luffy cocked an eyebrow in disbelief. There's no record of a gum fruit anywhere in the Paramecia volume, however Rayleigh picked up the classified volume. I did find something similar under classified. Luffy stood up and walked over to where Rayleigh was sitting to get a closer look at the book. Rayleigh started flipping through the pages again because he didn't bookmark what he found. What did the devil fruit that you ate look like, Luffy? He asked his student as he continued flipping through the pages. Let me think. Luffy put a finger to his forehead in hopes of trying to think harder to jog his memory. It was blue-violet, I think. It was round, like a ball. It had a stem on top and it was covered in swirls. Oh, and it tasted really gross. The moment Luffy finished describing the fruit he ate, Rayleigh's page flipping came to a stop. What was revealed on one of the pages was an illustration of the very fruit that Luffy just described at the top of the right page. Yeah, that's the one. That's the fruit I ate. Luffy confirmed. He was starting to get excited about knowing more about his fruit. Look further down. Luffy did as he was told and looked at what else was written on the page. The first thing he noticed was the name under the picture. A name he was not familiar with. A name he didn't expect. Human fruit. Model. Nika. Mythical zone type. Due to its unique nature, this devil fruit grants the user a baseline body with the properties of rubber, giving the user's body limitations and restrictions similar in nature to that of a common Paramecia type. The fruit's true power as a mythical zone type lies dormant until the user can successfully achieve an awakening. After awakening the fruit's true power, the user gains the abilities and appearance of the mythical sun god, Nika, granting their already rubbery body more strength, freedom, and creativity, and turning the user into what is known as the warrior of liberation. According to the legend that was inscribed on the ancient texts, the warrior of liberation was once revered as the sun god by slaves from ancient times for bringing freedom and joy to those around them. Because of the nature of this legendary being, they are described as the most ridiculous power in the world. After reading that final paragraph out loud, Rayleigh closed the book with a hard slap. He and Luffy were taking their time processing all this new information that completely changed their view of Luffy's devil fruit. But this new info, we now know that your devil fruit powers come from his own type, Rayleigh stated. Your body has already adapted to the belief that it's a Paramecia type, but we can fix that later. Luffy scratched the back of his head. I'm a little confused. If I've had zone powers this whole time, how come I've never transformed like all the other zone type users I've seen? It's most likely because you ate a variety of the human fruit that makes it unnoticeable, since you're already a human, to begin with. Vegapunk must have known that somehow, which is why he wrote it down in classified records. I can't tell whether he gave it to my crew by accident or on purpose. Rayleigh puts his books away before pulling out something else that jingled like a chain. Showing it to Luffy, it revealed a pair of sea prism stone handcuffs. Sea prism stone is a rare and unique substance that radiates the same energy as the sea, which can neutralize and drain the abilities of devil fruit users. What are those for? Luffy asked, pointing to said handcuffs. They're sea prism stone handcuffs, Rayleigh answered, we'll be wearing them while training. Why? After our little discovery, I'm gonna have to completely change your training regiment. The first step is for you to stop using your devil fruit powers. What? Luffy shouted, his eyes widened in shock. How's that supposed to help me get stronger? As it said in the book, the only way to unlock your devil fruit's true potential and, by extension, yours, is to awaken that dormant power. What the heck does that even mean? Rayleigh sighed. Here, I'll explain, so listen close. Awakening is the special stage in which devil fruit users unlock the true potential of their fruit's power, not only affecting themselves, but their surroundings too. Understand? Millimeters. Luffy nodded. Good, you're catching on quickly. Rayleigh makes a swift motion with his hand. Suddenly, the sea prism stone handcuffs disappeared from his hand. Luffy suddenly felt weak. All his energy was quickly drained out of his body, causing him to slouch over the log he was sleeping against earlier. He moaned in exhaustion while noticing that the handcuffs that Rayleigh was just holding were now clamped around his wrists. Heey Luffy groaned weakly, "Whatcha do that for? This is gonna be your training. Our first priority is getting you to completely master your haki before moving on to your devil fruit awakening. We'll be restricting the use of your devil fruit powers until you've mastered haki, as well as helping you get used to the weakness of the sea prism stone. By the time you take those off, you'll have a high tolerance to its effects." "How am I supposed to train my haki when my hands are bound like this?" Luffy was referring to the short chain that linked the cuffs together. Instead of getting a verbal answer, Rayleigh crouched next to Luffy before grabbing the chain with his left hand. Sea prism stone is as strong and durable as diamonds. But once you have completely mastered haki, you'll be able to do this. Rayleigh's hand was suddenly clad in a shiny black coating hardening, the most basic application of armament haki. So far, Luffy had learned how to do that much. But what the rubber man didn't recognize was that Rayleigh's hardened hand was now emanating a green, flowing aura. Next thing he knew, the chain link was completely crushed under the old man's grip. Pulling his hand back, the broken chain was now detached, leaving only the cuffs that were still around Luffy's wrists. Luffy may have been weakened, but he couldn't take his eyes off the amazing feat that his mentor had just demonstrated. That was so cool. What was that? Luffy asked cheerfully, despite the effects of the sea prism stone. That, Rayleigh began explaining as he deactivated his haki, was a more advanced type of armament haki, known as internal destruction. I learned it in the New World. I was able to emit my armament haki, making it flow into my target's body and destroy it from the inside out on contact. This technique can deal devastating internal damage, bypassing any defense, no matter how strong or durable it is. "Hey, wait a minute." Luffy interrupted, "Is that what you did when you removed Kami's slave collar back at Sabaody?" "That's right," Rayleigh answered, "I'm surprised you were able to put the pieces together. Looks like we found something you're interested in." "Of course I'm interested. I have to get stronger so I can protect my friends. I'll do whatever it takes to become the strongest." Luffy sat up, eyes filled with the fires of determination. Rayleigh smiled proudly, knowing he found just the right motivation he needed to pull through his upcoming training regiment. Even more proud of the fact that Luffy was already resisting the effects of the sea prism stone without even noticing. He barely had them on for 2 minutes, which slightly scared the retired pirate. "I admire your determination, Luffy. You've proven yourself to be a reliable leader to your crew. They must be proud of you." Luffy nodded with a smile. Rayleigh looks up at the moon through a gap in the jungle's thick canopy. "The sun will be rising soon, so get some rest while you can. Tomorrow's training is gonna be even tougher." "Right. Night, old man." Luffy lays back down to make himself more comfortable. "Oh, and Rayleigh." Thanks." The next morning, Luffy had a bit of trouble waking up since he slept with the sea prism stone handcuffs stuck to his wrists. Rayleigh neglected to mention to the boy sooner that he didn't have the key for them or that they were the only pair of cuffs that he had on his person. But with a whack to the head from a haki-infused wooden club, Luffy was now wide awake and with a comical bump on his head. After getting ready, the teacher and student made their way to a clearing with enough space to not harm the island's ecosystem if Luffy ever got out of hand with any collateral damage. "Alright, Luffy," Rayleigh said, "you've almost mastered the hardening stage of armament haki, so you're gonna be sparring against me next. Since you can't use your devil fruit powers, you'll have to get used to moving around in that fragile body. This training is designed to help build up your muscles at a much faster rate than you ever had back when you were made of rubber. Be warned, though, this training will put you under a lot of stress and pain, but all your hardships will be rewarded with developing your observation haki. So while we're sparring, I'm not gonna hold anything back. And I want you to do the same. Now, I know this may sound unfair since you're the one with the handicap, so I'll do my best not to kill you." "Sounds good to me." Luffy didn't seem scared in the slightest. If anything, he actually looks more serious than ever. "Good. Your first lesson will be to defend yourself from my attacks. But before that." Rayleigh walks behind Luffy and ties a blindfold around his eyes. "You rely far too much on your vision, so we'll need to prevent you from doing that in the future." "Huh? I can't see." Luffy struggles to get a good feel of his surroundings and starts waving his arms around, trying to get his bearings. "Leave that on for a while and let yourself get used to it." "Okay." Luffy takes a couple of slow steps forward before he quickly trips over a small rock in his path. Luckily, he stopped his descent by swiftly putting the other foot forward. "Damn it, this is gonna be tough," Luffy complained, standing back up straight. "How do you even sense rocks?" "This is training," Rayleigh reminded him. "You have to use all of your senses, not just your eyesight. No matter how good your eyes may be, you'll never see everything. Enemies that can move at the speed of sound must be detected through other methods. Once you develop your observation haki, you can intercept their attacks. After carefully processing Rayleigh's teachings, Luffy slams his fist into his palm. Right. I'm ready, so let's do it. Luffy stands completely still, arms to the side, legs spread, and fists tightened. He focuses on the sound around him. The sound of the wind blowing through the trees, the birds chirping, and the cries of the distant animals. But his main focus is his sparring partner. There. Bonk. Oh. Grr, everything hurts like hell. It's like I told you, pain is the most effective teacher when mastering haki. After many hours of bone-breaking abuse and soul-crushing discipline at the hands of his merciless mentor, Luffy made little, yet noticeable, progress in today's training. Even after the countless bruises and bumps he suffered, Luffy didn't let up for even a second, nor did he ask Rayleigh to let him catch his breath. He almost couldn't believe how much endurance Luffy had, even when the added durability that came with his zone fruit had been restrained along with his powers. That fire in his eyes never went out. The day's training session seems to have turned up the heat. This development did not elude the attention of the Pirate King's first mate. After giving Luffy some first aid, the two were now sitting around a campfire, with Luffy eating a huge chunk of meat right off the bone, like he hadn't eaten in days. Slow down, you're gonna choke yourself. Remember, your rubbery powers are disabled right now. Luffy didn't respond and instead just kept on devouring the source of protein. Back when he was just a kid, Luffy used to eat when he was upset. A habit that won't end anytime soon. Before he could take another bite, Rayleigh asked his student a serious question. Luffy, you were behaving a little differently today. What changed? Luffy froze. He slowly puts his half-eaten carcass back on the spit. An act of manners that Rayleigh thought he would never see out of the rubber man. When I think about all I've been through, all the battles I've fought, there's only one thing that I've learned from all of that. Rayleigh waited patiently for an answer, which first came in the form of Luffy's flames of determination burning in his eyes. There's always someone stronger. The old man was slightly shocked at how much more mature Luffy was becoming. When the two first met at the human auctioning house at Sabati Archipelago, Rayleigh's first impression of Luffy was mostly based around the straw hat he wore, reminiscing about the times when his former crewmate, Shanks, used to wear that exact same hat. But he neglected to see what was beneath that until he started training Luffy and getting to know him better. Now he was seeing Luffy in a whole new light. A light that was brought to life by the fire in Luffy's eyes. I made a vow to my brother a long time ago that I was going to get stronger than anybody. But in the end, he died because I wasn't strong enough to protect him. But no more. I've lost more than I could stand. And if I can't even protect my crew in their dreams, then how could I call myself their captain? I need this training, I can't afford any setbacks. No matter what I have to endure, I need to be the strongest before I meet up with my crew. Even stronger than Roger. I won't accept anything less. Rayleigh, full of pride for his student's newfound motivation, smiled. So, your strength comes from protecting your friends, is that it? Yeah. In that case, Rayleigh pointed two fingers in the direction of Luffy's glowing eyes. Keep that fire burning in your eyes. Never let it snuff out. Keep your friends close to your heart at all times. Let those images fuel your flame and keep rising higher, Luffy. Luffy felt more determined than ever after that. The thought of his friends and the memories they made together was washing over his mind like a maelstrom. You're thinking about them right now, aren't you? Rayleigh asked as if it was obvious. Luffy answered, I just wonder what everyone's up to. You still have something left in this world to treasure, don't you? The encouraging words of Jinbei echoed in his thoughts. I still have my CREW. Luffy whispered to himself, Zoro Luffy's first mate and swordsman of the Straw Hat Pirates. A muscular man of average height in his late teens with lightly tanned skin and moss green hair. He always carried around 3 swords for the sake of his 3-sword style. Before joining Luffy's crew, he was a renowned and feared bounty hunter who was known throughout the East Blue for his expertise in hunting down wanted pirates, thus earning him the name Pirate Hunter Rorano Zoro. While I'm with you, the only thing I dedicate myself to is fulfilling my ambition to be nothing less than the world's greatest swordsman. I solemnly swear from this moment forward that I will never lose again. Until the day comes when I defeat him and take his title, I will never be defeated. Is that okay, King of the Pirates? Usopp the crew's sniper and resident liar. A slim tan-skinned teenager with medium-length black curly hair and a very long nose. Usopp was known cowardly fella, known for his constant lies and tall tales that he enjoys telling to both friends and strangers alike. Despite his disposition, he strives to become a great pirate as well as better himself, working hard to keep his crew safe and help them accomplish their dreams as well as his own. Luffy welcomed him aboard his newly acquired ship, the Going Merry, after helping him save his village from the devious Captain Kuro of 1,000 Plans and his crew, the Black Cat Pirates. Usopp. I am the captain of the Usopp Pirates, a brave warrior of the sea. And mark my words, you will never set foot in that village. Bet on already. Huh? We're friends, right? So, get on. I'm really a pirate captain now. Don't be stupid, Usopp. I'm the captain. Nami the navigator and self-imposed treasurer of the Straw Hat Pirates. A slim young woman of average height with short orange hair. If Luffy weren't so oblivious to womanly charm, he would consider her to be very attractive. She has a blue tattoo on her left shoulder, which represented tangerines and pinwheels, a reminder of her hometown. Before joining the crew, Nami was a thief who specialized in robbing pirates of their treasure. Luffy, help me. He's gonna pay. Luffy? Nami? You'll always be my friend. Yeah. Sanji, a highly skilled cook and womanizer. He's a slim, muscular, long-legged man with blonde hair which he keeps brushed over to one side of his face. Sanji's most distinctive feature is his spiral-shaped eyebrows. Luffy met Sanji at the floating sea restaurant Barati, where Sanji worked as the sous chef. The owner and head chef, Zeph, was a former pirate who sacrificed his left leg to save Sanji from starvation when they were both marooned on a rock outcropping, high above sea level. Sanji takes great pride in his culinary skills, resorting to using only his legs to fight, for he cannot risk any harm to come to his hands, a cook's most sacred tool. Say, have you ever heard of the All Blue? Your dream is foolish. Then again, so is mine. Now's as good a time as any. Why not start my quest now? I'll be joining your little crew on your journey to be king of the pirates. You hear me? I want to be the cook on your ship. Chef Zeph. Thanks, you geezer. I'll never forget your kindness. I owe my life to you, old man. So, thank you. And Chopper, to the ship's doctor. Chopper is a toddler-sized human reindeer hybrid with a blue nose who ate the human fruit, as own type devil fruit, granting him the ability to talk and walk upright like a human. He was trained in the art of medicine by his parental figure, Dr. Kariha. He used to be extremely timid towards unfamiliar humans before he met Luffy, with whom he later found out had a lot in common. Luffy accepted Chopper for who he was and convinced him to become a pirate with him. Even if I don't have friends, I can still fight for something I believe in. You do have friends. I'm your friend, reindeer. Me. Okay, maybe I do want to be a pirate. But I can never be one of you, I'm not human. I'm a monster. Shut up. Let's go. Robin, the archaeologist of the Straw Hat Pirates and user of the flower fruit, a paramecia-type devil fruit, granting her the power to reproduce any parts of her body on any surface. She's a tall, slender young woman with shoulder-length black hair. Having nowhere else to go after the Straw Hat stopped a civil war in the desert kingdom of Alabasta, she held Luffy responsible for saving her life when she had given up on it. She temporarily left the crew after being captured by the World Government Covert Assassins, CP9, at Water 7 and escorted to the Judicial Island, Enies Lobby, where she suffered continuous torture at the hands of Spandam, CP9's chief. She was soon rescued by her crewmates after Luffy encouraged her to keep on living, despite the fear she had of losing those she cared about to her enemies. There's no place for me to go or return to, so I've decided that I'll join you. What? Those pirates just declared war against the world government. Robin. There's still something I want to hear you say. Tell me you want to live. I want to live, take me with you. Take me away from here. And Frankie, the shipwright of the Straw Hat Pirates, creator of the crew's current ship, the Thousand Sunny, and former ship dismantler and face of Water 7's underworld. Frankie of a self-modified cyborg at a height of at least 7 feet. His forearms were massively enormous with star tattoos on them, while his biceps were comparably small and a full-toned chest. He has bright blue hair and a prosthetic iron nose. Frankie used to run a gang of ship dismantlers and bounty hunters called the Frankie family, named after their founder and leader, until he stole 200 million berries from the Straw Hat Pirates. He later kidnapped Usopp and the severely damaged Going Merry after Luffy's crew retaliated against the Frankie family, while the boss himself went shopping on the black market with their stolen money. After getting tangled up in the same situation that got Robin captured, he was also taken to Impel Down to be interrogated by Spandam on the whereabouts of the blueprints for the ancient weapon Pluton, which Frankie inherited from his old shipbuilding master Tom. Frankie burnt the blueprints so that the ancient weapon could never be built. While fighting through and escaping Enies Lobby with the Straw Hat Pirates, they eventually patched things up until Luffy eventually invited him to join his crew after building the Thousand Sunny. If you want your undies back, then you're gonna have to join my crew. You got the finest vessel on the sea and no shipwright. What can I say? You don't leave me much choice. I gotta take care of my masterpiece, after all. So, set sail. I'm joining the crew. I'm gonna super miss you all. And Brooke, the musician of the Straw Hat Pirates and former member of the Rumber Pirates. An extremely tall reanimated skeleton with a large black afro with strong roots that was brought back to life after dying thanks to the powers of the Revive fruit, a paramecia-type devil fruit which grants the user a second chance at life. Brooke once sailed the seas with a pirate crew of musicians until they were annihilated by another stronger pirate crew. Unable to steer the ship, Brooke's soul found itself lost in the thick fog of the Florian Triangle. By the time he reunited with his body again, all that was left was a well-dressed skeleton, but he was still able to get a second chance at life to fulfill a promise he and his crew made to an island whaler named Laboon, whom they told to wait for them at the entrance to the Grand Line. Determined to stay true to that promise, he accepts Luffy's invitation to join the Straw Hats in hopes of seeing Laboon again. I'm glad to hear that Laboon is well and still waiting for me. My shadow has returned and we're leaving the Devil's Sea. Every day on that boat was difficult. Frankly, I had given up all hope. But, Luffy, you know what? I'm just so happy to still be Ollie hi HIV. Suo, does the offer to join your crew still stand? Yeah, welcome aboard. What? For real no why. Luffy cares about his crew more than anything, and he knew they felt the same way about him. They were now his sole reason for getting stronger. His crewmates are much more than just his friends, they were also his source of strength. His lifeline. He thought he lost them for good after they got into a fight with Bartholomew Kuma, one of the 7 warlords of the seas. They were hopelessly overpowered by the enigmatic Titan, who then went on to separate the Straw Hat Pirates individually with the powers of his paw fruit. A strange paramecia-type devil fruit which gives the user paw-shaped pads on their palms that can repel anything they touch with tremendous force and distances. Kuma sent Luffy's friends flying to unknown corners of the world, himself included. Since he was able to land safely on Amazon Lily, he assumed the rest of his crew were still alive. Not knowing their whereabouts, Luffy sent out a secret message that only his crew could decipher in the local newspaper. Their original plan on the Sabati archipelago was to wait 3 days for Rayleigh to finish coating their ship, making it worthy to travel safely underwater to get to Fishman Island, their last destination before going to the New World. But the whole crew separated the world over, it would have been impossible to meet back up at Sabati in just 3 days, so Luffy decided to give his friends 2 years to hone their skills and increase their chances of survival in the New World. Thus, Luffy purposely went back to the war-scarred island of Marineford to get his photo taken, as well as pay his respects to Ace's grave. The photo that was published showed Luffy with his eyes closed and holding his straw hat up to his chest after throwing a bouquet of flowers into the rubble, bowing his head in silent prayer. He successfully got his message across with a tattoo on his right arm, which showed the initials 3D2Y, with the 3D crossed out. The message translated to "See you at Sabati in 2 years." Being able to read Luffy like a book throughout the time they've known each other, Rayleigh easily predicts what his student was thinking right now. That's why I have to get stronger, so I can protect my friends, so I can fight to make their dreams come true, just like they do for me. Who knows, maybe your friends are thinking the exact same thing. Perhaps they all want to get stronger, just like you. Yeah, Luffy sighed, finally feeling satisfied with his current mindset. With his goals now on a straight path, he was prepared for what was to come during the remaining 21 months of training. No matter what challenges await him, Monkey D. Luffy will rise above it all. Meanwhile, somewhere out in the waters of the Grand Line. Which of the government dogs lives closest to here? Let's meet him. Another brutal day of hockey training goes by for the legendary pirate in training. Come nightfall, Luffy was in the middle of devouring another huge chunk of meat off the bone. With the restriction of his baseline rubbery body, Luffy had been eating less food than he normally does. At least 5% less. After quickly getting used to wearing sea prism stone handcuffs for the last couple of days, Luffy no longer felt like he was being drained of energy, although he still can't stretch. This intensified his training to new bounds. Today, he attempted to improve his armament. Hardening by fighting the colossal animals of Liscana. He could no longer afford to keep taking hits from the beasts since his devil fruit powers had been cancelled out, so he was forced to resort to constant dodging, something he was not the best at. But Rayleigh told him it was the perfect excuse to train his observation hockey by predicting where and, eventually, when the attacks would strike. Luffy's first opponent was a massive blue gorilla the size of a house. Following Rayleigh's instructions, Luffy prioritized speed over strength and let the opponent make the first move. Luffy's speed was growing by leaps and bounds. Before the revision to his new training regiment, Luffy demonstrated second gear to his mentor, explaining how it made him move at mind-boggling speeds. Rayleigh later identified this speed feat as Shave, one of the 6 powers. The 6 powers is a special, superhuman martial arts style that is mostly used by agents of the world government. Anyone who could master the 6 powers is said to have the strength of 100 men. Shave allows the user to move at extremely high speeds, making them seem like they disappeared. This technique is mostly used for avoiding attacks, as well as to attack at higher speeds, which can generate greater power. The first time Luffy witnessed Shave was when it was used by Blueno, a member of CP9, back at Eni's lobby. After carefully observing how his opponent moved with the technique, it was revealed that the principle of executing it properly was to kick off the ground at least 10 times in the blink of an eye. Unable to pull it off in his base form, Luffy utilized his second gear by pumping up his metabolism and allowing him to move at disappearing speeds, which surpassed Blueno's. After explaining how second gear works, Rayleigh decided to make the technique redundant. Consecutive use of second gear was really dangerous and taxing to Luffy's body. His increased blood flow gave his body more oxygen and nutrients, which is what makes him move a lot faster. Since his blood vessels and organs were made of rubber, he was able to handle it. But he never noticed the price that came with it. The more Luffy used second gear, the more oxygen and energy he ends up burning through, which can be quite straining on the body. In his second gear form, Luffy's body glows a light shade of red and steam starts billowing from his body like a steam train. The steam is the result of his entire metabolism rate going up so high that his sweat evaporates. So Rayleigh decides to teach Luffy how to use the 6 powers in place of second gear, which will benefit Luffy in the long run. This was one of the reasons Rayleigh had Luffy get used to the feel of Sea Prism Stone to overcome hypothetical situations where his enemies try to restrain his powers, but still, give him the strength to fight back. After all, the Sea only curse Devil Fruit users, while Haki and the 6 powers can still be used. Unfortunately, Rayleigh didn't know very much about the 6 powers, except for only knowing how to use Shave and Finger Pistol. Finger Pistol is a close-range combat technique that allows the user to push their finger into their target at a very high speed, leaving a wound similar to a bullet hole. This technique is more deadly than most bullets, as it is sharp and agile enough to penetrate even iron-hard defenses. Rayleigh decided to hold off on this form of training until after Luffy completely mastered Haki. He had planned on teaching Luffy how to combine Finger Pistol with the long-range capabilities of his stretchy powers. Luffy had a rocky start when fighting the blue gorilla, along with some other animals later on, for he also had to wear the blindfold again to train his observation Haki, making things a whole lot more difficult. But that's exactly what Luffy wanted. No matter how many times Luffy slipped up, he always got right back up. After the vexing day he had, Luffy was currently venting his frustrations out on his dinner while recalling the events that occurred. He was able to deflect and intercept most of the attacks from the large animals, while at other times he got away with a few scrapes and cuts. After fighting the blue gorilla, Luffy ended up having to avoid the jaws of a massive alligator to the crushing paws of a titanic lion. Luckily, his teacher was there to step in if things ever got out of hand. Damn, Luffy complained through a mouthful of meat, I swear, all the animals are ganging up on me. He swallows before taking another bite, I'll get him back as soon as I'm done eating. Do you think that's wise? Rayleigh asked, with a mug in his hand, going back for round 2 before giving your body time to recover. Yeah. I'm tired of getting beat by those MMM. Luffy gagged as choked on his dinner. Dropping the half-eaten bone, he pumps his chest to help swallow what was stuck in his throat until he finally managed to make the food go the right way. Luffy let out a relieving sigh. Rayleigh let out a disappointed sigh. Keep that up and it won't be the training that kills you. Your body's not used to eating as much as you're used to yet, so don't talk while eating, the old man asked, enjoying his drink. Got it, Luffy said, feeling a little embarrassed. Luffy then finishes the rest of his meal, this time at a more moderate speed, then chugs down the rest of his drink. He then immediately picks up his blindfold and ties it back on before standing up and marching off toward the dark jungle, later. I see. Try not to die, his teacher casually said with a smirk. Right. Luffy responded, punching the air above him while continuing on his way. Keeping his senses on high alert at all times, Luffy made his way through the dark jungle, which isn't saying much for a man with a blindfold on. After trekking through for a while, it would seem that the animals have decided to call it quits for the day, since he hasn't been able to pick up any trace of their presence. Huh. Where did all of them run off to? They didn't go to sleep, did they? Luffy asked in annoyance. Hey Mr. Gorilla. Mr. Alligator. Mr. Lion. I'm ready. Come out and fight me. Stopping in his tracks, Luffy sniffed around, hey, what's that? Catching a whiff of something, his mouth began to water. Whatever it is, it smells really tasty. Luffy muttered, following his nose, where's it coming from? He then walks off to do a little private investigating of the scent. Suddenly, his train of thought had shifted, hold on a sec. Luffy stopped, realizing that something wasn't right. Since he just ate, he was no longer hungry enough to fall for the tempting aroma of delicious food. Whatever it was that allured his nose, it smells a hell of a lot better than meat cooked over a fire. There were traces of spices and seasonings mixed in as well. Wiping the drool from his mouth, Luffy steeled himself, reminding himself that he and Rayleigh were the only two humans on the island. So why would there be the smell of cooking here? The animals he had been fighting on Lascano always behaved like wild and destructive beasts, clearly incapable of something as advanced as cooking. It could only mean one thing. Someone else is on this island, Luffy muttered cautiously. Not far from where the smell of food was coming from, a group of women are hiding in the dense foliage at the edge of the jungle, looking out into the ocean of the calm belt. They were all dressed in provocative warrior-style clothing, such as bikini-like straps to cover their breasts, very short loin clothes on their lower regions, and thigh-length boots with stockings on their legs. Some were even wearing long capes from shoulder to ankles. These were but a few members of the Kuja, a tribe of all-female warriors and residents of Amazon Lily. Each warrior carries a large snake wrapped around them, which the Kuja use as a bow. Amazon Lily and the Kuja pirates were ruled by the three Gorgon sisters, with the eldest, Boa Hancock, as their ruler and captain. She is known as the Pirate Empress for her status as one of the 7 warlords of the sea. She is considered the most beautiful woman in the world. Among those that were hiding in the foliage is the middle sister of the Gorgon sisters, Boa Sandersonia. She is a large woman who resembles a snake due to her long forked tongue sticking out of her mouth. She has a curvaceous figure and large breasts. Her head, while disproportionately large and wide to her body, is topped with long green hair. Unlike her subordinates, she does not have a snake to use as a weapon. Second was her younger sister, Boa Marigold. A large bulky woman, with a build similar to that of a sumo wrestler, with large breasts to go with it. Her orange hair is arranged in a way to make it look like the pattern on a cobra's hood. Below the 2 Gorgon sisters were 3 of their subjects. The first, and tallest, was Aphilandra, an extremely tall woman with childlike facial features. She has long orange-brown hair, falling past her shoulders, with a plumed Morion-type helmet with cheek guards on her head. She carries a sheathed sword horizontally over her lower back. Next to her is Sweet Pea, a very large corpulent woman with a masculine-like build with brown pigtails. She's one of the many Kuja warriors who carry a snake as a weapon. And finally, there's Margaret, a young Kuja lady who is quite tall for her age. She has short unruly blonde hair, long slender legs, and a slim curvaceous figure. Compared to the other women present, Margaret's the most normal-looking one. She keeps her snake wrapped around her waist. The group of women was sent to Lascana at the request of their leader, Boa Hancock, to deliver some supplies to Luffy, which mostly consisted of freshly cooked food. He didn't want to accept the food, since it would just spoil him, but the Pirate Empress couldn't help herself. After sorting out a misunderstanding when Luffy was sent to Amazon Lily by Bartholomew Kuma, he gained the trust of the Gorgon sisters for protecting a traumatizing secret that they hid from the rest of their subjects. Luffy understood the story behind their dark secret and declared that he despises the ones responsible for the sisters' suffering. As a result, Hancock fell helplessly in love with Luffy, as well as pledged her loyalty to him. The young man was oblivious to her affections and never returned them in kind. But that didn't stop the Pirate Empress from trying to win over his heart. She was worried that Luffy wasn't getting enough to sustain his health, so she sent her crew to deliver food for him discreetly, despite the promise she made to Rayleigh not to interfere with Luffy's training by pampering him. The buffet was laid out on a small plateau overlooking the sea. Nearby, the Kuja pirates are hiding in the darkness of the trees, waiting patiently for Luffy to arrive so they could observe him and report his condition and status to Hancock. While they waited for their mutual friend to arrive, Sandersonia was holding an active transponder snail, a species of telepathic snail that is used for vocal and/or visual communication throughout the world. Connected on the other side of the snail was Boa Hancock's voice. "Well, is he there yet?" Hancock asks worriedly, her voice coming out of the snail's mouth. "Not yet," Sandersonia answered, "we're still waiting for him." "Ooh, I hope she shows up soon. I don't want the food getting cold," Hancock whined. "Don't worry, sister. There's no way Luffy can resist the smell of gourmet cooking," Marigold reassured her sister, "he'll show up." "Oh, I hope so. The longer we wait, the more likely you'll be discovered by Rayleigh instead." Despite his suspicion that an intruder could be nearby, the overwhelming aroma of the scent that Luffy was following was too much to resist. His nose eventually let him close enough to the source that he began drooling again. That Luffy sniffed, "Smells like food. Okay, I gotta see." He excitedly rips off his blindfold to behold a large spread of food set up on a low table. "Ah. I knew it." Luffy exclaims before running to the buffet but quickly slowed down, "Is all this stuff for me? Who could've?" Luffy stopped to inspect what was laid out in front of him. The most noticeable dish he recognized was a large pot of pengorgonzola with sea king meat, a dish that Luffy fondly remembered eating back on Amazon Lily. Not those guys again, Hancock. Luffy groaned, finally realizing without a doubt who the intruders he was sensing were. I appreciate what they're doing, but I'm not hungry at the moment, he complained to no one in particular. Closing his eyes, he focused his observation haki to locate the auras of anyone he was familiar with. It didn't take long for him to feel the presence of 5 figures hiding nearby. Found him, he thought, turning his head towards the jungle. He casually matches towards the spot where he sensed the group when he sensed someone else. Someone unfamiliar. Someone hostile. His concerns were realized when 3 people, Margaret, Sweet Pea and Aphalandra, were suddenly flung out of the dark foliage and slid painfully across the overlook until they were right next to Luffy, who was shocked at the state they were in. "Girls." Luffy called out, "Are you okay?" "Luffy, run away." Margaret cried out fearfully to him. "Run from what?" Luffy asked worriedly, crouching down to examine their beaten forms. "Who did this to you?" Before he could get an answer, he heard and felt the sound of heavy footsteps as he looked up. Emerging from the trees was a very tall and broad man with thick arms and thin legs. He had a beard and a W-shaped mustache, both a different shade of green. He wore a horned helmet with the left horn broken off, an open black and purple sleeveless coat revealing his chest, green pants, a brown belt, and brown shoes. Under his coat, he had a thick iron chain from his left shoulder to his right hip. Sitting on his left shoulder was a short and scrawny old man with a long white beard and mustache. He wore a green coat and a short horned helmet with the right horn missing, similar to the larger man. He was carrying what appeared to be a portable support pole, holding an IV drip that was injected into his right arm. Standing back up straight, Luffy leered at the newcomers, for he noticed that the larger man was carrying Sandersonia and Marigold's unconscious bodies underneath each of his arms. "Hey, you!" Luffy shouted, eyes full of rage, "What did you do to my friends?" "Biojack, who's he?" the larger man asked, raising an eyebrow at Luffy in annoyance. "Earlier." Before getting ambushed by the unknown intruder, Margaret and the girls were carefully waiting for Luffy to appear. He finally showed up, wearing only his sandals, shorts, and a blindfold. Taking off the blindfold and noticing the food they laid out for him, the girls began to giggle in excitement. "Luffy has found the food," Sandersonia whispered into the transponder snail. "Yeah, it's him alright." "Haaooah," Hancock moaned in delight from the other side of the connection, as if she was about to faint. "Luffy's there." But when the girls noticed that he didn't start stuffing his face right away, they got a little concerned, thinking something didn't seem right. "Luffy usually has such a big appetite," Aphalandra said worriedly. "I wonder what's wrong." "Why, I don't think he even noticed the frilly spring outfits we made for him," Sweet Pea added. Margaret frowned. "What's going on?" Hancock asked. "Did he like it?" "Something's wrong, sis." "Luffy's not eating, he's just standing there, glaring at the food," Sandersonia answered. "Maybe he's not hungry?" asked Marigold. "I'm looking for the Empress," said a deep voice from behind, the leader of Amazon Lily. The Kuja pirates turned around, gasping at the sudden presence. With a wicked grin, the large helmet-wearing man backhanded Sandersonia, causing her to slide roughly across the dirt and drop her transponder snail. "Who are you?" Marigold demanded, holding her giant palm in both hands, while the rest of the female warriors readied their own weapons. "State your business." "Since you asked, the name's Burndy World," the large man answered, uncaringly. "I'm here to kidnap the government's dog, Bo Hancock." "You heard of her?" Marigold gasped, shocked by what she heard. "You wish to kidnap the princess?" asked Margaret, pulling back an arrow with her snake bow and taking aim at World. "She is not here, but we shall face you ourselves," declared Sweet Pea, readying her weapon the same way as Margaret. World flinched. What?" he said, glaring at the small elderly man, Biojack, sitting on his shoulder. Biojack started with a raspy voice. "I didn't make any promises, right? I just saw the Kuja ship on the shore and thought she might be here. We just got unlucky this time, no big deal," the old man finished before taking a few sickly coughs into his hand. "What a waste of my time," World said disappointingly before turning around and walking away. "Hold it," demanded Marigold, causing World to stop. "You can't come here to kidnap my sister and then walk away." Marigold's body then starts transforming. She grew larger with scales appearing all over her body, her legs were replaced with a long tail, and her face grew more snake-like. The power granted to her by the zone type devil fruit, snake fruit model. King Cobra. "If you want to fight, then you shall find one at the end of my blade." World slowly turned around and looked at her with mild curiosity. "You're her sister?" "Hey Sonia. Mary. Someone tell me what's going on right now." Hancock's voice demanded. "Do you hear me, please, say something." "Lolololo." World laughed, looking down at the snail lying on its side on the ground. "I see, the Empress is on the other side of that snail. In that case." World suddenly dashed towards Marigold. He drove his hockey-coated fist at Marigold, who stopped the punch with the blade of her palm. The sudden movement kicked up a cloud of dust between the two. More tenfold shotgun. World chanted, blowing some air at the dust, causing it to launch at Marigold's face like bullets. Marigold cried out in pain as the attack knocked her to the ground. "You keep your hands off her, or else," shouted Margaret as she and Sweet Pea unleashed their arrows at the man who attacked the royal sisters. World easily evaded the arrows with blinding speed. Lolololo. He laughed before pulling his fist back and charging at the three warriors. "Now. I have no business with the rest of you," said World, giving the group a threatening look, "so time to die. That chance, you bastard." Luffy lost it and charged straight at the menacing man. He coated his fist with armament hockey and slugged World right across the face, to which he didn't even flinch. At the last moment, before Luffy's fist made contact, World coated his entire head in armament hockey, making it feel like he had punched a solid wall. "Hey, kiddo," World said casually, glaring at him, "what are you doing?" Before Luffy could pull back, World swung his leg around and kicked Luffy in the gut, sending him flying and crashing into a large stone outcrop. The impact was strong enough to leave Luffy's broken body imprinted in the solid stone, stuck as he tried his best to struggle out and recover. But World didn't give him that luxury. He drops Andersonia like a hunted game before picking up a small rock off the ground. "Say goodbye." He casually tosses it up and down in his hand before shouting out, More hundredfold gun." And threw the rock right at Luffy. "That won't work," he started, but he briefly forgot that he was no longer made of rubber. And before he could react, the rock suddenly grew 100 times its original size, becoming a huge boulder, and was coated in armament hockey. The hardened boulder slammed into Luffy, causing him to scream in pain before blacking out. "Get over here, I think Luffy's awake." Luffy heard a voice as he was starting to regain consciousness. He knew the voice had to belong to Rayleigh since he recognized his face as he struggled to open his eyes. However, Luffy blacked out once again, only briefly. After another minute had passed, he opened his eyes again, his vision now much more clear. It was now the break of dawn, and he spotted three more familiar faces, looking down anxiously at him. "Hancock," Luffy said weakly, "what are you doing here?" "You finally woke up," Hancock said, relieved that the man she loves is finally awake. What a relief. Boa Hancock is considered the most beautiful woman in the world. She has a well-proportioned figure compared to her abnormally sized sisters. She is tall and slender with long black hair that extends past her waist with locks that frame her face, showing off her forehead. She has dark brown eyes with long voluptuous eyelashes and pale skin, with a narrow waist and very large breasts. Hancock wore a purple dress with gold trim and a great light purple image of her Jolly Roger at the bottom, black heels on her feet and large gold snake-shaped earrings hanging from both her ears. Behind Hancock was her snake weapon, Salome. Salome is a large white female snake with big pink spots running down her whole body, while the underside was a pale yellow, with thin black lines across it. Her head was topped with a cracked horned skull with blue hair jutting out from the back, like a lion's mane. She also wore a purple scarf tied around her neck. The last familiar face was Gloriosa, more commonly referred to as Elder Nyan, a short wrinkly old woman with very thick lips and white hair with a pink flower on the left side of her head. She wore a sort of green bubble belt meant to hold up her short spotted skirt, as well as a cape around her shoulders. Her purple snake weapon acted like a staff, with the upper body curled up. Luffy grimaced in pain as he struggles to push himself up into a sitting position. "Don't try to get up," Rayleigh said, "you still haven't fully recovered yet." Ignoring his teacher, Luffy jolted his head around and shouted, "Oh, yeah, what happened to the girls?" "They were treated for their wounds and now they're sleeping," Gloriosa answered calmly, before lowering her head in grief. "As for Sonia and Mary." "That bastard kidnapped them, didn't he?" Luffy asked, already knowing the answer. Yes, Gloriosa nodded. Luffy was furious at that fact, damn it. What the hell was that guy's deal, anyway? Hancock stood tall before answering, from the sound of it, he wanted something from me because I'm one of the warlords. "Are you going to rescue your sisters?" Rayleigh asked. "Of course," Hancock said firmly, thinking how that was even a real question. Princess Gloriosa interjected, "If he really is the notorious Burndy World, then even you're too weak to challenge him." "Hancock, take me with you," Luffy interrupted, startling his elders, "if we fight him together, there's no way I'll lose to him." Hancock gasps in shock. Normally, she wouldn't expect her love interest to be so insistent. "Luffy?" "Hold on," Rayleigh spoke up, "the reason that we upped your training here is because you're not strong enough to fight opponents like him. I haven't given up on that. You are improving a lot faster, but you still have a long way to go before you can completely master hockey. And without your devil fruit powers, you'll be killed. I'm not gonna lose to him twice," Luffy shouted. "Luffy, think about it," Rayleigh shouted back, "what have you been training yourself for all this time? If you leave now, you might never see your friends again. But Luffy frowned, feeling like Rayleigh was using his friends as an excuse to stay put. He raises his right fist and gently presses it against his chest, taking a moment to remind himself why he took his training more seriously than before. Hancock and the others are my friends too. If I just abandon them when they're in trouble and I could have done something to help them, then I'd be turning my back on the vow that I made to Ace and my friends. Luffy tightened his right fist, unaware that it was now coated in armament hockey. Luffy then shouted. So how can you expect me to just sit here and do nothing while the people I care about are in danger? Oh, Luffy, Hancock murmured before turning her attention to the old man. Rayleigh, I promise I'll keep him safe. With him at my side, we'll finish this quickly. Rayleigh looked rather annoyed at her insistence, but sighed tiredly. It doesn't matter what I say, Rayleigh said, I'm not going to change your mind. This got a smile out of both Luffy and Hancock. Rayleigh then stands back up on his feet. That's why I'm coming with you. Huh. After a couple of hours of resuscitating, after Luffy's swift defeat at the hands of Burndy World, he, Rayleigh, Hancock, and the rest of the Kuja pirates were currently sailing the sea on the Kuja's flagship, the Perfume Yuta, a galleon with a pink mansion-like structure in the middle, and paddle wheels installed on the stern in place of a rudder. Instead of a figurehead on the bow, the ship has a pair of Yuta, a breed of ferocious and highly poisonous sea serpents, tied to the front, where they steer the vessel. The front sail bears the Jolly Roger of the Kuja pirates. This ship was specially designed to sail safely through the Calm Belt. The Calm Belt is an ocean that borders the north and south of the Grand Line, which acts as the breeding grounds of sea kings, colossal sea creatures that can grow to the size of islands, which makes them the biggest obstacle. This stretch of ocean acts as the most effective barrier for those who try to enter the Grand Line directly, because, for reasons unknown, there is never any wind or any ocean currents in the Calm Belt. It acts like a void where everything is stagnant, making it impossible for sailboats to travel through. Islands, such as Amazon Lily and its neighbor Liskana, are located in the Calm Belt. Thanks to the Kuja's close relationship with snakes, these brave warriors were more than capable of taming Yuta to pull their vessel, protecting them from sea kings that could easily swallow their ship whole, as well as traversing the Calm Belt safely. On the deck of the ship, Luffy was leaning the guardrails, staring out into the ocean. In addition to Luffy's previous apparel, he was now wearing a red, sleeveless jacket given to him by the Kuja, with a hood up to conceal his head, at Rayleigh's request. The latter doing the same with his hood. Speaking of the old man, who approached Luffy from behind, cleared his throat, gaining his student's attention. Luffy, since there's a good chance that you'll be going up against this world character soon, I'm willing to remove those restraints for you, so you can fight at your best, Rayleigh said, pointing to Luffy's sea prism stone handcuffs. Luffy took a moment to contemplate his restraints. If he took them off, he could use his devil fruit powers to fight at his best. But, on the other hand, they don't have any space cuffs. If he decided to remove them, Rayleigh would have to break them off with his internal destruction, rendering them useless afterward, and they don't have the key or any spare cuffs. The Kuja, while a strong and proud people, were too isolated in the Calm Belt to have any knowledge of sea prism stone or devil fruits, so they were unable to accommodate a spare set of cuffs. With a smirk, Luffy shook his head and answered, I'll leave them on. I'll just think of this as part of my training. Besides, I never go back on my word. I'm not taking these off until I can do it by myself. Rayleigh smiled and put a hand on his student's shoulder from behind, expressing how proud of Luffy he was for continuing to raise the bars high. The reason Rayleigh decided to accompany Luffy with Hancock was to supervise his student's training in a practical setting, while making sure he was there to prevent Luffy from getting himself killed, since he already had so much riding on Luffy. He refused to intervene in any of the fights that Luffy may encounter during this rescue mission. He also had a personal reason for going, but chose to keep it to himself. If that's what you want to do, I won't stop you. But it will make things a lot harder, Rayleigh warned. That's the whole point, right? Luffy asked rhetorically. Rayleigh smiled as he got a glimpse of the fire he came to admire so much, blazing majestically in his protégé's eyes. Luffy? Rayleigh? A raspy voice interrupted from behind. The teacher and student turned around to be greeted by Gloriosa, who continued. Come with me. I need to inform you both about our enemy, she said before walking back the way she came, towards Hancock and the rest of the Kuja pirates. Hancock's glance was currently fixated on a small piece of paper in her hand. The Beaver card. Burndy World's Beaver card. These cards can also act as a guide for those who want to find the owner of the card. When placed on a flat surface, the paper will slowly shift in the direction of its owner. Beaver cards are only made in a certain place in the New World. As to how Hancock was able to acquire it. Earlier, after Luffy got knocked out. The boulder that had just been thrown at Luffy had just been broken in half after World's armament hockey had faded from it, with Luffy's unconscious body falling face flat into the dirt. Luffy? Hancock's voice sounded from the transponder snail, which was now in Biojack's feeble hand. So, is this the Empress of Amazon Lily? Burndy World spoke into the snail. Where's Luffy? Tell me you didn't hurt him. Hancock demanded angrily. World looked a little confused at that name. Biojack spoke up, I assume she's talking about that boy. World looked at Luffy's downed form before looking back at the snail and chuckling, Balalolo. Come here and see for yourself. I'll leave my Viver card next to the punk. As for you, Pirate Empress, if you ever want to see your sisters again, track me down in 2 days, before the break of dawn. Good luck. Balalololo. Wait, no Georgia-cha. The snail immediately went to sleep after World hung up, who then picked Sandersonia back up and dragged both her and Marigold away through the dark jungle. World, Biojack muttered, I've heard that name from somewhere before. Luffy. World simply stayed silent and continued walking away. Present. Back on the deck of the Perfume Muta, Gloriosa was in the middle of telling the group about the man who had kidnapped Hancock's sisters. She had just finished explaining the madman's powers after Luffy asked, being on the receiving end of it. Luffy recently started learning from Rayleigh that information is power, something which he now had in common with one of his crewmates Nico Robin. World had gotten his powers from eating the More fruit, a paramecia-type devil fruit, which allows the user to amplify the size, speed, and strength of any object they touch, including themselves. World's reputation was mostly based on his use of his devil fruit powers, mainly targeting islands and other ships, which he destroys with a single shot from his power-amplified cannonballs. This, in turn, earned him the nickname Destroyer of the World. Luffy asked Gloriosa, his hands in the pockets of his borrowed jacket. The elder nodded, that's what they called him. World has a reputation for taking out anything that crosses his path. He was as much a threat to other pirates as he was to normal civilians. It didn't matter who you were. Luffy frowned. Pirates who destroy and ruin other people's lives are the kind he hated the most. 30 years ago, the government decided to secretly assemble his enemies and others who held grudges against him. They joined the Navy and executed a plan to take down World once and for all. Ultimately, World and his allies were defeated. If it was such a decisive victory, why on earth is he causing trouble again all of a sudden? Hancock asked. I have no idea, Gloriosa answered. I heard a rumor that he had been locked up in Impel Down, in a frozen state of constant slumber. Perhaps, he was awakened somehow. At the mention of Impel Down, Luffy was suddenly having troubling thoughts. After he had snuck into the underwater prison to try and save Ace, with Hancock's help, he managed to make it to the lowest level of the prison, level 6 Eternal Hell, where the world government keep their most powerful, dangerous, and irredeemable prisoners. Their crimes are so atrocious that their mere existence is considered a major threat and are given either a life sentence or the death penalty. They were basically erased from history. Shortly after stirring up trouble in the prison and causing a consecutive mass breakout, with Jinbe included, the prisoners on level 6 who didn't break out of their cells were later released by Marshal D. Teach, or Blackbeard, and his crew, the Blackbeard Pirates, who appeared after Luffy's group departed. Teach then went on to recruit those who wanted freedom to join his crew. Those that refused his offer escaped on their own through the pandemonium that Luffy instigated. And one of those many escaped convicts was Burndy World. Break of dawn, the next day. As the sun was beginning to rise from the east, the Perfume Muta stopped in its tracks when the Viver card in Hancock's hand stopped moving. As the crew and their passengers checked their surroundings, they were disappointingly confused to find nothing but ocean. This is where the Viver card led us, but the Pirate Emperor said. Luffy grumbled, squinting his eyes in confusion, it's not broken or anything, is it? After a moment of silence, the sea beneath them started to quake. This tremor came so suddenly that the two Yuta pulling the ship cried out in worry as they stared at the water around them. Luffy's pupils suddenly flashed red, immediately sensing a presence approaching from below. You feel that too? Rayleigh asked him, sharing the same feeling. Yeah, Luffy nodded. Wait a minute, Hancock demanded, what's going on? Gloriosa shrieked, her face turning white and her eyes full of fear as she noticed something massive rising out of the water in front of them. The sudden increase in buoyancy created rough waves in the water, causing a majority of the crew to fall onto the deck or hang onto something to maintain their balance. The only ones unaffected by the shaking were Rayleigh and Luffy, who stood there, their bodies completely still, while they kept their feet planted on the deck, matching the swing of the ship to keep themselves level. What the crew beheld in astonishment was a giant ship that looked like an artificial island mixed with an aircraft carrier. It consisted of small attachments on both sides, with one on the front of the main structure, which was all covered in trees and buildings. The center of the ship had a large spherical dome with the World Pirate's Jolly Roger on the front, which housed cannons, as well as the ship's primary weapon, a giant cannon. The back of the ship had engines and aircraft runways attached to it. This was the flagship of the world pirates, the Grosseid. Awesome, Luffy muttered in awe as he stared up at it. I haven't seen a ship that big since Thriller Bark. Focus, Luffy. Rayleigh ordered. An island, Hancock exclaimed. Thank you for coming all this way, shouted a voice coming from the very top of the ship, Empress. Looking up, they saw Burndy World, with Biojack sitting on his left shoulder, stepping out. So far, your sisters are enjoying their stay. World shouted mockingly. As if on cue, the middle part of the ship opened up like a big metal sliding door to reveal what was behind them. Hancock gasped as she saw Sandersonia and Marigold together in a large birdcage, hanging from above the floor of the interior. Big sis. Sandersonia cried out to her sister. Run away. Marigold called out, more worried for her eldest sister, just leave us. Sonia. Mary. Hancock cried out in worry. We'll get you two out of there, don't worry. Luffy announced. It looks like that kid's here, too. Biojack pointed out before letting out a sickly cough. Alalolo. World chuckled, slightly amused by the youth. He can take a beating, I'll give him that much. Placing his right fist on his hip confidently, he shouted. If you want him back, then you have to come get him. Then the doors that revealed their caged hostages began to slowly close, hiding them from view once again. I'll be waiting. Once they were fully closed, a pair of cannons appeared from the front of the ship, pointing directly at the Kuja's ship. Hancock immediately took action. Quick, evade them. She commanded, don't let them hit us. At her command, the Yutas pulling their ship turned and began to maneuver around the Grosseid while evading cannon fire. They raced as fast as they could across the water to prevent themselves from taking any damage, as the rest of the crew was still struggling to stand up straight. We need to get closer to that island, somehow. Luffy shouted, his gaze fixed on the closest deck of the enemy ship. Just a moment. Hancock cried out. The two Yutas pulling the ship were still struggling to avoid enemy fire, but were quickly starting to show signs of fatigue. Luckily, they were able to get the perfume Yuta out of the cannon's range of fire. They think they can avoid us that easily? World said, still standing on the ship's apex. At that moment, several cube-shaped cannons on the side turned to aim, then fired a barrage of cannonballs at the front of the Kuja's ship, where the vessel had no hope of evading them. The Yutas hissed in fear as they noticed the incoming rounds. I got this. Just then, Luffy appeared on the head of the Yuta that was closest to the cannonballs and got in a fighting stance. Shave. Luffy disappeared before reappearing on top of an incoming cannonball and punching it into smithereens with a hockey-powered fist. He then quickly used Shave again to jump to the next cannonball and repeated this action until all the cannonballs were reduced to sinking chunks of iron in the water and the Yutas were safe. Luffy then safely landed back on top of one of the Yutas, who hissed at him gratefully. Back at the top of the Grosseid, World smirked at the display of skill. Well, wad you know, the kid's got a lot of spunk, doesn't he? He commented before turning to Biojack and demanded, come on, I need bullets. The old man reached into his coat and pulled out a handful of rounds and handed them to World. More 50-fold cannon. World shouted as he threw all the bullets simultaneously toward the young fighter. Luffy quickly turned his gaze to the incoming bullets, which suddenly grew 50 times their size and were coated in armament hockey. Damn it. Luffy panicked, knowing he couldn't do much to intercept these projectiles. Luffy had to do the unthinkable and jump up in the bullet's path and cross his hockey-coated arms to block them. Slave arrow. Before the rounds could make contact, Hancock fired a rain of arrows that were tipped with a stylized heart design, which came from a pink heart-shaped bubble in front of her, turning the projectiles to stone on contact. Their trajectory ceased and they fell into the ocean before they could touch the ship. Luffy lowered his arms and turned to Hancock, who looked like she just relished an invisible bowstring. The two shared a nod and smiled. What happened? World asked, wondering why his rounds didn't reach their target. This petrifying power of Hancock's comes from eating the love fruit, a paramecia-type devil fruit which grants the user a special range of attacks that use emotions like lust and perversion to transform their opponents who are captivated by the user's beauty into stone, regardless of their gender. This power extends to non-living objects. With Hancock's unparalleled beauty, there is no other user more qualified to wield this fruit's power. Only those with strong willpower or, in very rare cases, do not find her attractive, are immune to the petrification. Way to go, Hancock. Luffy said, giving her a thumbs up, you were awesome. Hancock turned away in embarrassment, her hands on her cheeks and gleaming at the compliment. She was overjoyed to hear such kind words from the man who melted her recently cold heart. Luffy just praised me. She thought, is this what they call a proposal? However, she ignorantly misunderstood everything about how relationships work. Her little daydreaming was interrupted when a group of World's grunts came running out onto the deck with swords in hand. One of them carried an intact pair of sea prism stone handcuffs, intending to subdue and restrain Hancock and her devil fruit powers. Hey Empress. World shouted, just turn yourself over to my men and no one will get hurt. It's up to you. Hancock responded with an infuriated growl. She then jumps high from the railing of her ship, doing an acrobatic flip in the air before landing on the deck of the Grosseid, in front of World's men. She unleashed a swift roundhouse kick, knocking out several men. Despite her slim and elegant frame, she possessed immense physical strength, using extremely powerful kicks that can easily crush stone. She took up a fighting stance, her leg raised high, and glared furiously at the scrubs before her. You kidnapped my sisters, attacked my ship, and shot at my beloved. The pirate empress shouted, eyes filled with rage, death is too sweet a mercy for you. Never mind, guys. World called out to his men, you can go ahead and kill her. Hold on, World. Biojack interjected, we were supposed to take her as a hostage. We can always nail her dead body on a pole and head to Marineford. World retorted, kill her. Love beam. Hancock fired a heart-shaped beam from her hands, targeting the rest of the men, who were all too distracted by her beauty. After the beam died down, all that was left in its wake were the petrified bodies of the men, stuck in a swooning pose of affection. What, again? World pointed out. So, it's true. Biojack added, she really can turn people into stone. Luffy took that moment to join Hancock on the deck of the enemy ship. Landing next to her, he praised her feats of power. Nice one. He cheered with a wide grin, that's showing him who's boss. Why you're too kind, Luffy, she muttered in blissful embarrassment. Back on top of the Grosseid, Biojack was stroking his beard, pondering once again. I know that kid, the old man thought, wasn't Luffy the name of that pirate, Straw Hat? Those idiots, World said, disappointed at the incompetence of his men, it's like they're begging me to kill them. Puru. The transponder snail on Biojack's person started ringing. Answering it with a colic, he held it up next to World's face. Don't worry about it, Captain, said a man's voice coming out of the snail, I'll help you dispose of them. Sebastian, good. World responded, I'll give you 5 minutes. How kind, but 2 minutes is all I'll need. Back on the deck, Luffy and Hancock were readying themselves to charge into the entrance of the Grosseid's interior. Are you ready? Hancock asked. Yeah. Luffy answered. They both made a beeline dash to the front entrance. Go straight. We'll get in through that opening. Luffy nodded before his eyes flashed red again, alerting him of a presence in their path. Great water shot. A voice echoed from the inside. The great torrent of water came hurling out at them from the entrance, targeting the pair. Reacting on instinct, Luffy quickly wrapped his arm around Hancock's waist in a tight grip. Shave. He managed to dodge the blast of water, dashing to the side and saving them both. Gently letting her go, much to Hancock's disappointment, they heard heavy footsteps as someone emerged from the dark opening. Shishishi. The figure laughed, so, you want to get your friends back? Stepping out onto the deck was a very large and muscular Wotanfish man, with black hair, blue skin with green spots on his head and shoulders, as well as fin-like ears, fins on his shoulders and elbows, and a dorsal fin on the top of his head. His apparel consisted of a violet vest with a white collar and red bow tie, as well as 2 white cuffs with black buttons on his wrist, similar to a tuxedo. He was wearing dark blue pants with black shoes and a golden belt buckle in the shape of a fish. Finally, he wore a pair of dark sunglasses over his scarred eyes. In his hands, he wielded a pair of massive spiked maces that were as thick as trees. This sharply dressed brute was Sebastian, the half-fish man, half-giant hybrid, and senior member of the World Pirates. Don't worry, you'll be together soon enough in hell. Sebastian claimed before bringing one of his clubs down to crush the 2 intruders, who both managed to back in time, evading the attack. Landing safely, Luffy grinned, cackling in amusement, excited that he can finally test his new hockey skill against a worthy opponent. Bumping his fists together, his arms flared with armament hockey, prepping them for a battle-hungry skirmish. Ready to bust some heads, Luffy shouted. Bring it on. Wasting no time, Hancock pressed on with her retaliation against the Wotan, half-fish man, half-giant, but Sebastian was able to intercept her powerful kicks with his immense size and the strength that went with his build. After realizing that she wasn't getting anywhere with her assault, she jumped back to gain some distance. Standing straight, she held up her hands, shaping them into the shape of a heart. Step aside if you know what's good for you. Or she yelled, perhaps you'd rather be turned into stone love beam. The pink heart-shaped beam enveloped her target. It had no effect. Shishishi, Sebastian chuckled, sneering down at her. Why isn't it working? Hancock yelled, trying to figure out what was wrong, surely, no one's taste in women could be that bad. So sorry, Sebastian said, lifting his sunglasses, revealing his squinting eyes with milky white pupils, turns out that I'm blind, so your power means nothing to me. Don't take it personally. Hancock gasped, shocked that she would encounter an opponent with such a defense to her powers. How about you sharpen your teeth on something harder, then? Luffy shouted from behind Sebastian. Quickly turning around, he saw the black-haired youth suddenly appear right in front of his face, causing him to flinch. Hawk bullet. Using the basic principles of finger pistol that he knew and applying it to his entire hockey-coated fist, Luffy decked Sebastian across the cheek with blinding speed, no pun intended, causing him to drop his weapons, his sunglasses to fall off, and sending him crashing to the deck, stopping on his back. In the wake of Luffy's attack was a smoking, deeply bruised knuckle-shaped dent branded into the Wotan's face. Sebastian lay defeated on the deck, groaning in pain with blood leaking from his mouth and nostrils. "Damn," he struggled to say in a broken voice, "you really got me good, kid, and with just one punch, He fainted. "Wait, that's it," Luffy said disappointingly while tilting his head to the side. Deactivating his hockey, he looked down at his hands and repeatedly clenched them. "I mean, I didn't hold anything back, but now I don't know my own strength. Looks like I've got Rayleigh to thank for that." "Nice work." Hancock cheered for her beloved as she ran to his side. "Thanks," Luffy said, pouting, "but I'm a little disappointed. I thought I was finally gonna get a decent fight." Putting a hand on his shoulder, Hancock tries to cheer Luffy up, "And you will, once we find World." Luffy was then reminded of how easily World beat him the first time with little effort. Now that he knew how his more powers worked, he was ready for a real challenge. Appreciating the kind gesture from the pirate empress, he nodded and went running off across the deck around the ship. "Let's go, Hancock," he said. Hancock smiled, blushing innocently at the sound of her name. "Oh. Why, yes, dear." She giggled and happily followed him. Meanwhile, before the three-way fight began, World and Biojack stepped down a ladder to the inside of their ship in a room that appeared to be the bridge, which was located just above the room where they held their hostages. Looking out the window, the pair barely saw the fight's conclusion. "Oh, Sebastian," World said, "this is a disappointment." Seeing the two victors running off to another part of their ship, World growled, "I can't believe it." He opened his large hand towards Biojack, who was still sitting on his shoulder. Understanding the gesture, the old man rummaged through his coat before pulling out another transponder snail and placing it in World's hand. "Come in, Garum," World spoke into the snail, "lead me to the intruders, and be quick about it." "Roger, Captain." Another man's voice replied from the snail. World grabbed Biojack with his free hand and dropped him roughly onto the floor, landing on his rear. The old man wasn't hurt but was still shocked by the harsh treatment. "Keep an eye on the hostages, will ya?" World said as he walked down the spiral staircase. Despite what just happened, Biojack crawled to the edge of the staircase. "Be careful, World," he said worriedly. Back on the deck. As Luffy and Hancock were running off, Sebastian was able to quickly gain consciousness but was unable to move. "Come back here," he said in a voice too quiet for his targets to hear, "if you think this fight is over, you're dead wrong. Look at that sad little fishy face." Sebastian flinched at the new voice. He couldn't see who it was, but he knew someone else was there. Floating above him was a young woman with unusually big round eyes, red lipstick, black eyeliner, and long, light pink hair that was tied into pigtails with black and white flower hairpins. She wore a red crown with a black cross on top, a short long-sleeved shirt that was short enough to expose her abdomen, and had 3 different black heart shapes on it, a red mini cape with a pink ribbon on the front, black and white striped tights that were completely covering her legs, a miniskirt, a red and gold belt with a heart-shaped buckle, and a pair of red buckled boots. She was also carrying a cute red devil-shaped parasol. Floating next to her were what appeared to be a couple of silly-looking ghosts with black round eyes and thick lips, with their tongues sticking out. This ghost-accompanying girl was Perona. "You might make a cute slave," she said playfully, pointing to the downed Wotan before crying out. "Negative extra big hollow. Go get him." She produced a couple more ghosts and sent them flying right at Sebastian's bleeding form. The ghosts passed right through his body, and just like that, his spirit was even more broken than his body as he muttered miserably, if only I had been born as a little amoeba, then life would be so simple and free of all this violence." Horror. Perona giggled, "Never mind, I don't want you anymore." This ghastly power of hers was granted by the hollow fruit, a paramecia-type devil fruit, which allows the user to produce ghosts known as hollows with a variety of abilities and grants the user the properties of a ghost, like flying and phasing through solid matter. Negative hollows have the power to rob their victims of their will to fight or live by phasing through them. Noticing the commotion, Hancock looked behind her as she kept running and spotted Perona. "Who's that?" she asked. Luffy also turned around, noticing Perona. "What the hell?" Perona yelled, taken by surprise, "Is that Straw Hat?" "Hold on," Hancock turned toward Luffy and asked, "Do you know her from somewhere?" "Maybe, but not at the top of my head," he answered before calling out to Perona, "Hey, thanks a lot for slowing down that fish dude for us." At his words of gratitude, Perona's cheeks blushed faintly. Hey, my actions were independent of whatever mess you've gotten yourself in. Chalk it up to coincidence, okay? She turned before ranting bashfully, besides, my friend said he needed to go somewhere, so I just came along to pass the time. I had no idea the likes of you would be here, otherwise, I would have stayed at home. At the moment she finished her dialogue, the floor beneath Luffy, Hancock, and Salome suddenly opened up to form a square-shaped hole, causing them to fall below the deck of the island-sized ship. Oh, no, Perona screamed, watching them fall through the darkness. From the bridge above, Biojack witnessed the whole scene unfold. That flying girl just called him Straw Hat, the old man said to himself, I see, so it's true. Meanwhile, below the deck of the Grosseid. Geez, what's wrong with this ship? Luffy complained, rubbing the back of his head, as a sign that he was still getting used to his relatively fragile body. Floors aren't supposed to do that. He and Hancock were recovering from the fall they had after landing on a stone floor. Wherever they were, it was one of the most bizarre places either of them have been to. They were in a long corridor with the walls and floor all made up of cubes, which were made up of every substance and texture imaginable, resembling a small child who had stacked up his wooden building blocks to make a pretend city. The architecture looked completely messed up and unstable. Hancock was still on the floor, facing away from Luffy, her body started shaking as if she were cold. Luffy, she called out, sounding a little panicked, are you certain you don't know that girl? Huh? Luffy turned to her in confusion. That cute flying girl following us? She added, finally showing her worried face. Oh, yeah. Let me think, Luffy pondered while scratching his cheek, I think I saw her back on Thriller Bark. Pretty sure she was our enemy then, but I don't remember her name. Hancock turned around and gasped, putting her fingers over her mouth. He's playing dumb. She thought, then asked herself, infidelity, this is infidelity, isn't it? The now grumpy Luffy had his hands on his hips as he looked back and forth between both directions of the strange corridor. Damn it, where are we supposed to go now? He growled in annoyance. Meanwhile, back on the perfume Yuta. Rayleigh, who was watching from the sidelines, was impressed that Luffy was able to defeat such a large opponent with just a single move. If he was fighting alone, not that Hancock contributed much, he would have yielded the same results without even trying and without his devil fruit powers. He could only imagine what his pupil was capable of after he gets his powers back. His inaction in this situation was because he promised Luffy that he would not intervene in his fights and only step in if his student was about to die, since he couldn't afford to let Luffy kick the bucket. But that didn't mean he couldn't have a little fun of his own. After Luffy and Hancock fell through the floors, Rayleigh made himself scarce and jumped overboard, gently landing on the deck of the Grosseid and casually sifting through the downed bodies of World's Grumps. He remembered seeing one of them holding an unbroken pair of sea prism stone handcuffs and decided to take them as a souvenir. Once he found what he was looking for, he went back to the perfume Yuta, staying out of sight of any interlopers that might show up at the scene. There wasn't much he could do for Luffy now, not without the risk of being discovered, except wait for him and Hancock to return. Back below the deck of the Grosseid. As they continued running through random corridors for what felt like hours, Luffy and Hancock couldn't find a way out of the accursed maze that they had fallen into. It was like a giant puzzle made up of cubes, leading them this way and that way. There were so many corridors that it was impossible for them to get their bearings. What kind of place is this? Luffy asked, panting as he ran, why is it like a maze? Not expecting an answer, they continued to run until, after turning another corner, they spotted a bright light at the end of the next corridor. Running toward it, they ended up in a large open space, with several pathways and unmarked corridors to choose from. Finally. Luffy said, relieved, I thought we'd be stuck forever. Wait, now where are we? Hancock glanced around the room, frowning. At this point, any direction will do. She said before pointing to a random pathway, come on, let's try this path. Gotcha. Luffy agreed. With Hancock and Salome being the first to make it through the entrance, a large block of solid stone fell from above, blocking the entrance, and Luffy's path was cut off between them. Luffy? Hancock's stifled voice called out from the other side, you're not hurt, are you? What happened? Luffy looked up at the top of the cube that blocked his path. Standing on top of the block was none other than Burndy World, this time, without Biojack. The man was looking down, smirking darkly at Luffy at the sight of it all. Lololololololo. He chuckled, I could kill the Empress, but I think I'll have some fun with you first. Hancock, don't worry about me, go find your sisters. Luffy called out, hoping Hancock can hear him. But, Luffy. Hurry. He insisted. Alright, then. I'll go, she said hesitantly, please be careful, my love, we shall meet again. Yeah, I got this, Luffy said, glaring up at World. World, watch out for that kid. Said Biojack's voice. World pulled out a transponder snail, to which Biojack continued. He's no normal boy, so don't underestimate him. World was in slight disbelief. You remember the story, right? He's that upstart, the one who raided Marineford to rescue his brother, Portas D. Ace, from execution. He's the leader of the Straw Hat Pirates. You're facing Monkey D. Luffy. I'm sorry, who? World asked, still unconvinced that Luffy was a threat. Oh, you know him. The Navy Vice Admiral, Garp, is his grandfather. That seemed to have tipped the scale for World. Why you mean the one who throws cannonballs? He shouted in shock before looking back at Luffy, are you telling me this twerp is the reason that Navy headquarters has fallen into ruin? I don't believe it. Luffy continued leering at him, anger boiling up inside him. World went back to his usual dark smirk. So you saved that brother of yours, or not? Luffy's eyes widened in horror as the memory of Ace dying in his arms flashed back, haunting his mind. That's what I thought. A wimp like you isn't strong enough to save anybody. World taunted Luffy, who fell for it. Shut the hell up. Luffy yelled in fury as he jumped up at World, pulling his fist back. With anger clouding his better judgment, he forgot to use haki. He just wanted to make World pay for disrespecting Ace's death. World vanished, causing Luffy's punch to miss. He reappeared above Luffy before kicking him to the floor with a heavy thud. Luffy winced painfully, trying to get up. He didn't feel World using haki in that kick, but it still hurt like hell. He forgot how fragile his body was now, but that made him realize how important that was to his training. His anger then died down to moderate levels. Finally managing to get back up, Luffy spotted World standing behind him with his back turned. Luffy shut his eyes tightly, trying to activate his observation haki. When a heavy fist came charging at him from behind, Luffy was able to avoid it by a hair by crouching. Shave. Luffy called out. Giving him an opening, Luffy came back around World and wrapped his arms around the larger man's neck, taking him by surprise in a strangling hold. Get off me. World grumbled angrily, trying to shake him off. Before he realized it, his energy was rapidly starting to leave his body. His hands were now too weak to break Luffy's grasp. What the hell have you done? World demanded, his struggle starting to die down, bringing him to his knees. Sea Prism Stone, Luffy answered with a grin, it's part of my training. I gave myself a handicap to make myself stronger by getting used to how they feel. What? World screamed in shock, barely seeing the Sea Prism Stone cuffs on Luffy's wrists. Handicap, so you have devil fruit powers. I thought those were just weights. They're not weights, they're the real deal. Luffy answered, still keeping his arms in a firm grip around World's neck. You cocky little bastard. Filled with undying rage, overshadowing the Sea Prism Stone's draining effects, World pulled himself off the ground and charged at one of the name cubes that made up the wall, on a collision course. At the last moment, World's body made a quick 180 degrees and slammed Luffy into the cube. Luffy let out an agonizingly painful scream at the impact, which loosened his grip on World. The black-haired young man slowly slid off World's back. But before he could hit the floor, World punched him square in the gut, pushing him into the same cube. Luffy coughed up a fistful of blood, his body now lazily inlet into the cracked cube, now with a large knuckle-shaped dent imprinted below his ribs. Not giving him time to recover, World delivered a swift kick into Luffy's X-shaped scar, sending him crashing through the cube, shattering it and revealing another room on the other side. Luffy winced heavily at the impact, his body still not used to the sensitivity of blunt force trauma. You're not dead yet? World asked in annoyance, walking into the dark room. That was a pretty sneaky move you pulled off, brat. But you're not the only one who uses underhanded tools. The room they were in was filled with shelves stacked with every kind of weapon you could think of. Everything from bladed weapons to projectile weapons was sorted neatly in piles and shelves. This is my weapons storage, World said, feel free to use whatever you want. World walks over to a stack of double-edged swords and picks one up before tossing it on the floor next to Luffy. Swords. Going to another shelf, he reaches out for a spear and tosses it. Spears. Luffy was starting to get pissed off at the display of mockery World was flaunting in front of him. World continued throwing random weapons at Luffy, guns, hammers, you can take what you like, then maybe this'll get fun. Getting himself back up, Luffy pushes the weapons away before finally getting back on his feet. I don't need any of that crap. That Pridal Jetcha killed, World said in annoyance, picking up some shuriken. I don't need any weapon. Unfortunately for World, he unintentionally gave Luffy plenty of time to recover and focus all of his senses. He realized too late the folly he had ensured when he saw Luffy undergoing some sort of transformation. Luffy's arms, legs, and much of his chest flashed with armament haki. The edges of the black coating resembled wispy ends of flames, giving it a tattoo-like appearance. This shading of armament extended across his face, which reached around from ear to ear and over his eyes, resembling a bandit mask. His pupils flared red with the concentration and perceptions of observation haki, which also released a chilling shockwave with flashes of black lightning conqueror's haki. World didn't notice his hands trembling at the shockwave until he dropped all the weapons and tools he collected, making a loud clattering sound. "All I need is guts," he shouted, flexing his hardened muscles and getting into his typical fighting stance. This was the new form that Luffy discovered during his intense training with Rayleigh. This astonishing transformation was the culmination of observation, armament, and conqueror's haki, all combined into one form. And most notable of all. No devil fruit powers required. Fourth gear. Stick man. Completing his transformation, Luffy's piercing red eyes glared at a shocked Burndy World, whose arms were shaking at the sight of this overwhelming display of power. Snapping himself out of this intimidating distraction, World quickly grabs a large spike ball flail hanging from the wall and starts swinging it around above him. More 50-fold speed. The flail was now spinning so fast that it seemed invisible, causing a strong gust of wind to blow throughout the room, sending a majority of the lighter weapons to fly around the room like they were caught in a tornado. Furious hammer. World shouts as he brings down the propelling weapon onto Luffy, stopping the strong draft. Once the dust settled, it revealed the spike ball at the end of the flail stopped right above Luffy, who caught one of the large spikes with a single haki-coated hand, just inches above his head. Luffy didn't even flinch or take a single step. "What?" World shouted in disbelief. "Is that all?" Luffy asked in a low casual voice. Not giving him time to react, Luffy tossed the spike ball over his head, pulling World closer to him and causing him to lose his balance. Luffy closed the gap dashing underneath World's falling form before delivering a powerful uppercut to his gut, causing him to lose his grip on the flail and sending him flying toward the ceiling. World's flailing body rocketed up before recovering in midair. Coughing up a splash of blood, he puts a hand over the spot where he got punched. Looking down, World sees Luffy rocketing towards him with a powerful jump. He now understood why Sebastian was taken down so easily, also realizing that he seriously misjudged the young, black-haired fighter. His first and easy win against Luffy had made him overconfident, which has now come back to bite him. But he thought of a way to turn the tables around in his favor again. More 70-fold. Eagle Luffy chanted at the same time. Speed. Battling. In an act of desperation, World unleashed a barrage of haki-coated fists down toward the incoming youth, to which Luffy was able to intercept and counter every single punch with his own with equal speed. They both yelled out in their assaults, creating small shockwaves with every impact, with random streaks of small black lightning radiating out of Luffy. "Still think I need a weapon?" Luffy shouted through his teeth, his arms still punching away. "Don't push your luck, kid," he yelled, "you're just wasting your haki." 100-fold speed. The speed of World's punches increased even further. Luffy couldn't keep up and was overpowered with devastating blows to his entire front before crashing back down to the floor, creating a small crater on impact. After the dust settled, he was panting and hissing in pain. World landed in front of Luffy's fallen form, towering over him like a mountain. Before he could get back up, World quickly picked up the shuriken he dropped earlier and threw them at Luffy, trapping his arms and legs. Completely immobilized onto the floor, there was nothing Luffy could do to fight back or defend himself. Already, the haki of his fourth gear was starting to fade away. "Just as I thought," World said, grinning, "you're too reckless in your actions, and that came at the cost of your brother's life. Even now, you're no different." Luffy flinched severely. Hearing those World again hurt him more than any punch he had to endure. And World knew that. "You may have powered up a little in this new form of yours, but how long did you think that would last?" World said, pointing out Luffy's flaws. "If you had come here without sealing your devil fruit powers, whatever they may be, you might have actually put up a decent fight for more than a minute." Luffy growled at his mocking declaration. "Not convinced? Then allow me to teach you a little something about haki," World declared. "Despite its useful capabilities, there is a limit. If you overuse it, it'll deplete, rendering you vulnerable to the point of exhaustion, and you won't be able to use haki again until you give it time to recharge." Luffy was shocked at this new information. He just got the hang of using haki whenever he wanted, but had yet to learn from Rayleigh about the repercussions and negative side effects. Before he could attempt to break his binds, World slammed his haki-coated fist right into Luffy's stomach, causing him to scream in agonizing pain, coughing up blood, and his eyes rolling in the back of his head. The world around him began to fade away in darkness. "If you leave now, you might never see your friends again. A wimp like you isn't strong enough to save anybody." Luffy's mind was haunted by hurtful memories of his recent failures, reminding him of how being reckless led to the misfortune that he and his crew had suffered in the past. "I never want to make them go through that again." And worst of all, it led to him losing the only brother he had left. "I'm so pathetic, so weak. You're too reckless in your actions, and that came at the cost of your brother's life." He hated to admit it, but World actually had a point. Throughout the entirety of Luffy's journey as a pirate, he only relied on his strength to get the job done. Mainly, his role was to beat up whoever was the strongest of any enemy faction that he encountered while leaving his crew and allies in the dust. Luffy was always so optimistic, having so much unconditional faith in his friends to break through any obstacle that they may encounter. In the end, they all came home with a few cuts and bruises. Some suffered far worse injuries than others. But Luffy didn't realize sooner that the further they traveled into the Grand Line, the stronger and more enemies there are. And their defeat at Sabati Archipelago, which led to the crew's separation, was the clincher. Even though they were lucky enough to reach the end of paradise, the halfway point of the Grand Line, they were far from ready to consider taking on the challenges that awaited them in the new world. That's what all this training was for, so Luffy would never have to worry about endangering his friends again. He wanted his crew to see him as the leader that they all deserve. Because, without his friends there with him, he would have died shortly after he first set sail. To him, being a better person meant changing who he is. To become the most powerful fighter. To become a captain that his crew can truly depend on. To become king of the pirates. Come on. Wake up already, idiot. Time's a-wastin'. Get back out there, you damn fool. Luffy's unconscious face was currently getting slapped silly by a clown. Sitting right on Luffy's chest, whose limbs were now free from their bindings, trying to slap him awake, was a slim blue-haired man with clown makeup and a big round red nose on his face. Part of the motif was he had crossbones in the form of an X painted down his face, 2 blue lines over his eyes, and red lipstick. He wore a red and white striped shirt with short sleeves, white clown-issue gloves, a grey sash around his waist with a matching scarf around his neck that was tucked into his shirt, a pair of loose pants reaching down to his calves, just above his striped socks and pointy shoes. Hanging from his shoulders was an orange fur-lined captain's coat. He also had an orange hat with his Jolly Roger on it sitting atop his head. Buggy the Clown, captain of the Buggy Pirates, the latest addition to the 7 warlords of the seas, former pirate apprentice of the Roger Pirates, one of Luffy's first rivals, and a completely misjudged fraud. Despite his title and history, Buggy was a complete weakling compared to most pirates. The only notable thing about him was the power he gained from eating, albeit by accident, the Chop Chop fruit, a paramecia-type devil fruit that allows him to split his own body into pieces and control them however he liked, with the added bonus that he is immune to slashing attacks. What's your problem? Buggy screamed while he continued his wake-up slaps. If you want to take down world, quit lying around. Get back up and fight, damn it. Putting a pause to his slapping, Buggy was now panting, his face dripping with sweat. After catching his breath, he was about to deliver another slap until Luffy's hand lashed out and grabbed the clown's hand to stop him. Looking down, Buggy saw that Luffy's eyes were snapped open and reignited with his flame of determination, which freaked him out. Hissing for breath, Luffy muttered, "Maybe I can save them, maybe I can't, but I'll never know unless I try." Buggy was flung off of him, causing him to hit the ground behind him. Luffy's fighting spirit had returned with a vengeance, his eyes blazing with new resolve. Standing back up, he glared around and noticed Buggy's crew, not even bothering to ask why they were there. Turning to their captain, Luffy demanded in a venomous tone. "Tell me which way did he go?" Fearful of the revived Straw Hat captain, the Buggy Pirates all simultaneously answered in unison without hesitation, while pointing to the doorway behind Luffy. "He went that way." After thanking his unexpected benefactors, Luffy went running towards the doorway, or, in his fragile state, stumbled, leaving Buggy and his crew behind. "That guy better be ready for an ass-kicking," Luffy shouted as he ran haphazardly. "I'm coming for you, world." Screaming and running through yet another confusing cube-ridden maze, trying to find his way out, Luffy quickly found himself lost again. "I don't get this place," he whined, "where the hell am I going?" Suddenly, while trying to get his bearings, the corridors around him started getting blocked off by cubes coming out of the walls, floors, and ceilings, leaving Luffy with only one unblocked path to take. "It must be a trap, but what choice do I have?" he asked himself while running. In his haste to try and find a way out, cubes were coming out of random places, trying to crush him. But with his observation hockey, he was able to detect where and when the cubes would appear, dodging them with minimal effort. He spots a light at the end of the corridor. Able to avoid the last of the crushing cubes, he made a wild jump through the opening and rolled into the large room, which was free of any cubes. He found himself in some sort of massive engine room, with a large engine in the center of the room that was connected to the wall, with a single set of pipes and a control panel. It didn't take Luffy a second more to realize that he wasn't alone, though. Standing near him was a middle-aged man with a drop-shaped rot-on body with thin arms and legs, cube-shaped pigtails in his hair that were tied with an orange band, and a thick mustache and eyebrows. He wore a pair of blue-rimmed goggles with green lenses, a blue shirt with white stripes, with the sleeves rolled up to his shoulders, brown gloves with matching boots, and a red scarf around his neck. Strapped to his back was a huge hammer, with 2 large metallic cubes connected to the top. "Arrarararara. The old man laughed. "Welcome aboard my ship. I'm Garam, the man who ate the cube fruit. Now, with my powers, I can shape anything into a cube." So this is the bastard responsible for all those annoying cubes, Luffy thought, irritated. Reaching for his massive hammer, he slams it into the floor in front of him, shouting, "Observe." For a moment, it seems as if nothing happened. Then, suddenly, several towers of cubes started rising out from the floor, creating a wall around Luffy, trapping him. "More cubes." Luffy growled, before jumping high through the opening at the top. The moment he was free, Garam appeared in front of him, about to strike him with his hammer. Luffy quickly crossed his arms to block it, his arms coated in haki. He gets knocked to the ground, but quickly recovered. Looking up, he sees Garam standing on top of the tower of cubes. "Come on, kiddo, are you serious?" Garam asks, "You think I'm gonna let you reach the captain that easily? Try this." Garam places a hand on top of the cube he was standing on, chanting, "Cube booster." A bunch of miniature cubes start shooting out of the larger cube before they were sent flying around Luffy. Like angry bees, the mini cubes start circling around him like a swarm. Luffy, activating his observation haki, starts punching the cubes that flew straight toward him. Being able to deflect every cube, Garam decided to step up his game. He uses his powers to push one of the larger cubes from his tower, sending it on a collision course to Luffy, who seemed distracted by the mini-cube swarm. But he underestimates Luffy's perception. Shave. Luffy vanished from the eye of the swarm, reappearing closer to the larger cube that was on the move. Pulling a haki-coated fist back, he shouts. "And Hawk Bullet." The cube was shattered into gravel. "What?" Garam yelled in shock, that cube was made out of corundum. Even with haki, it should have taken more than that to break it. Luffy's eyes widened with wonder when he looked at his hands. The haki coating now had a slight shade of red, while the base color was still a shiny black. "Well, that's new," Luffy muttered curiously. Before either of the two combatants could jump back into action, they heard a voice coming from the cube corridor. "Crap Hat must have beaten World by now. Time for us to take credit. I mean see how he's doing." Stepping into the room were Buggy and his crew. "Who are you?" Garam demanded. "Wait a second, you must be that other guy that Biojack mentioned. Why are you here?" Before he could get an answer, Luffy dashed past Garam and escaped through another corridor, leaving Buggy to pull his own weight for once. "Hey! Get back here, Straw Hat!" Buggy called out. "Kick his ass, Buggy," Luffy retorted, having more important things to worry about. Luffy had a lot more on his mind as he ran. First of all, he wasn't happy to admit that World was right about him when he said he was reckless in his actions, but he proved that statement earlier when he overpowered Luffy, even after activating 4th gear. Stick man. This was only the second time Luffy had attempted this transformation. The first time, he could still use his devil fruit powers. In his haste, his body had burned through more energy and haki than he could supply, which led to his easy defeat. When you fight someone with devil fruit powers that made them faster than the speed of sound, it was nearly impossible to keep up with them, even with observation haki. Luffy had to completely change his game plan if he wanted any hope of defeating Burney World. One of the obstacles that caught him off guard earlier was the mention of Ace's death. World made Luffy believe, for a moment, that he was the reason he lost his brother. But, remembering way back on the battlefield of Marineford, Luffy was too exhausted to stop Ace from falling for Admiral Akanu's taunt and attacking him. And when Luffy was in a vulnerable state, Akanu took that opportunity to execute the Rubber Man. But Ace didn't die because Luffy allowed it to happen. He died so his little brother could live. Luffy was too stubborn to die in the first place, but was equally as stubborn when it came to taking risks. Before he even made it to the battlefield, Luffy had spent some time recovering from the various deadly poisons that he was exposed to from fighting the Warden of Impel Down. In his haste to rescue Ace, Luffy pleaded for the assistance of his new ally, Emporio Ivankov, to speed up his recovery, which came at the cost of reducing his lifespan by 10 years. With Ivankov's Horm fruit powers, his request was granted. This was a prime example of Luffy's folly. One of many that he wishes not to repeat. From now on, no more crazy stunts. With his heart set on overcoming this latest obstacle, Luffy reviewed what he knew so far of World's devil fruit powers and came up with a countermeasure. And this time, he's gonna win. After dashing through the corridor for a few minutes, Luffy found himself in yet another large open room. Looking around, he saw that he was completely surrounded by iron walls, with large protruding iron spikes covering every inch, like some sort of giant Iron Maiden. He noticed the hole in the floor, assuming that was where he was sent flying out of. High above him was a large birdcage, hanging from the ceiling. Luffy? Luffy's thoughts were interrupted when he heard the cries of familiar voices coming from above him. He spots Andersonia and Marigold locked in the birdcage. "Eyes. Are you okay?" he shouted back. The girl smiled at him in relief. Don't worry, I'll get you out. Just hold on a sec. Luffy jumps up high reaching for the edge of the cage. He climbs up to the lock, gripping the bars between the door and the cage tightly. He tried his best to pull them apart, but the bars wouldn't budge. Careful, Luffy, Sandersonia warned, this cage is made out of sea prism stone. That's why we haven't been able to escape. Seriously, damn it. Luffy retorted angrily until he remembered what Rayleigh demonstrated to him not long ago. Hold on. He recalled how Rayleigh was able to crush the chain of his handcuffs with a single hand. A green aura flowed into the chain, destroying it from within. That's it. Luffy perked up with a grin. Firmly gripping the bars with his now hockey-coated hands, Luffy took a deep breath before letting out a smooth exhale. Closing his eyes to focus all of his senses, picturing how Rayleigh managed to pull off internal destruction. So far, there was no reaction after using all his basic senses, so he tried applying a thicker layer of armament hockey. The results were the same. Switching to observation hockey, he looked deep within himself and noticed something. A vision of a spark, followed by a flurry of cherry blossom petals. Opening his eyes, he was startled when he discovered that his hockey-coated arms were now covered in a red, flowing aura. Gritting his teeth, he tightened his grip on the bars. After they were easily crushed, separating the latch from the door, he quickly pulled the door wide open. Before he could forget this new tingling feeling, Luffy remembered what he had to do once he unlocked this power. He quickly brought his right hand over the sea prism stone cuff on his left wrist. And just like the cage, it broke just as easily. He threw the broken cuff away before quickly moving on to the last one. He was able to crush the last one, but not enough to break it off completely when he was interrupted by a large fist slamming into his face, knocking him back onto the floor. Luffy? The Boa sisters called out. Luffy was able to recover from the fall a lot easier than he had before. He suspected that some of his rubbery powers have returned to his body. Grasping the feeling that the elasticity was back, he still could stretch far on his own yet. He still needed the other cuff off. A loud thud sounded in the center of the room, revealing Bernie World landing heavily on the floor. You've become quite the pest, World said. Why can't you just give up and mind your own damn business, you pathetic little brat? You think you can kidnap my friends? Not gonna happen. Luffy shouted back, standing back up, besides. Luffy paused, holding up the hand with the broken cuff still on it. If I couldn't even pull off something like this, how could I protect my crew? World raised an eyebrow, hiding his shock that Luffy was able to advance his hockey to be able to crush sea prism stone. That thought was then overshadowed by his next claim. Your crew? Is that really what you're so stuck on? You're so transparent. This is all because you couldn't save your big brother, isn't it? World expected a reaction of horror from the boy. But Luffy didn't budge. Oh? World continued, trying to taunt him. By the way, just where are these beloved crewmates of yours? I pity them. Having someone as reckless as you as their captain. You'll only lead them all to an early grave. Luffy's expression didn't change, but he did clench his fist. I only came here to save the girls, Luffy said, but I didn't expect to find something more while I was here. Something that I'll treasure for the rest of my life. Fa. World spat, and what could you have possibly found here, besides your tomb? Luffy slowly closes his eyes before taking a deep breath. World's answer came in the form of Luffy's left arm, coated with hockey, grasping the remaining cuff on his wrist. The same red aura that he used on the cage started emanating from his hockey again, with a slight grip. The last cuff came off and was thrown across the room. By resolve. The rubber man was back in full force. World smirked in response, excited that maybe he was finally gonna get a decent fight, now that there are no longer any reserves. Lolololo. I'm gonna put an end to this in 30 seconds, World said, arrogantly. You won't beat me this time. The two combatants were about to throw down for one final tussle. That is the end, so, thanks for watching. Comment down below with recommendations on what fanfic I should do next. And remember to like and subscribe to my channel.